Welcome to Rainer Teo's show. This is the podcast where I interview entrepreneurs and mavericks who get shit done.
Hey, what's up, my friend? So, in today's episode, we have Daniel Sim on the show. So, Daniel is the founder of Golden Goose Property, right? It's a business, right, where he teaches people how to invest in UK properties for positive cash flow. And what's interesting about Daniel is that he used to sign on as an army officer. And for those of you who are unaware, especially the international audience, when people in Singapore sign on the army, it's usually for life because it's an iron rice bowl. Pretty hard to get fired from the army unless you do something wrong. So for Daniel, right, what's interesting is that not only did he leave the army, right, he actually left the army to become a full-time property investor. Plus, right, starting up his own education business. So in today's episode, right, we talk about number one, Daniel's formative years, right? What are the things that he did in the army as well as in the public sector? Then we spoke about why he then decided to leave a comfortable paying job to become a full-time property investor. So what was his emotions and thought process behind it? And how did he make that transition? Because it's something that is, I think most people struggle with. How do you take that leap of faith, right, to do something on your own, right, instead of working for someone else? Then after which, right, we dive really deep into UK property investing, right? We talk about number one, right? Why did he choose to invest in UK properties instead of Singapore properties? Then he shared the things that he looks out for before he invests in UK properties. He also talked about, mistakes to avoid. He shares, whether the strategy that he employs, can it be used outside of the UK markets? And also with the rise of interest rates recently, how did that affect his UK property investments? So all this and more in today's episode. Go listen to it right now. And by the way, if you want to connect with Daniel, I missed this part out. I'll leave his social media profile in the description below. Without further ado, let's get started. So, okay, Daniel, right, happy to have you today on the show.
Thanks for having me, Rainer.
So, from what I've gathered, right, you have been in public service for a good 10 years, right?
Yeah,
so
maybe a bit more than 10 years.
Okay. I'm curious, what were you doing back then in the public sector?
Oh, so actually my dad is pretty old. So, we were growing, when we were growing up, we didn't have a lot of money, right? So, my dad actually drove a taxi, for many years to bring us up. So then, the opportunity came, went to army. Actually, I was a choir boy all these years. So when I went into BMT, and then eventually, when I signed on, all my friends looked at me and said, sure not. You don't look like the army kind of guy. So I was actually in the military for quite a number of years. They gave me a scholarship, which I was very grateful for. It allowed me to see myself through school, support my family in the process. And then, I was there. After graduation, I served for about 7 years, finished my bond with them. And then I transited to the Prime Minister's office for a couple of years. So I was doing organization development, helping, build teams, look at public sector transformation, organization development. And then thereafter, what did I do? I transited into the private sector, actually, I was doing building culture. I was a consultant for companies, large companies like Clarins, both in the public and private sector, and facilitating. So I really enjoyed doing that. I did that maybe about 3 days a week. Yeah. And then before, I think about in 2020 or 2021, then I started educating people more on the property side of things, right? Especially in Singapore, because so many people buy properties, have investments gone wrong, lose a lot of money. I feel big take lah, very sayang, right? And all these hard-earned monies are lost. Yeah, but alongside this whole journey, even when I was in the public sector, I was also building my own portfolio in property. Yeah, so that's a bit of a long answer to your question of why I was in the public sector and how long.
So maybe just to backtrack a little bit, you mentioned that you decided to sign on and most of your peers were surprised. So I'd like to know what made you want to sign on?
Oh yeah, that's an interesting one, right? Maybe, I don't know what demographic your listeners are, but I guess everybody going through NS, the thought would come through your mind, should I sign on, should I not? The pay is quite attractive. So when I was in officer school, right, I'm not those very fit type. I mean, unlike you, I know you were very fit even now. But I was struggling through, the fitness side of things. But I was also very motivated to do well. And then there was this Navy recruitment talk. They came in, and then this recruitment officer say, "Oh, what period do you all have after this?" Then we said, "Oh, we got SOC." Then he said, "Oh, what's that? I don't know. Navy, we don't have SOC." Wow. So that was his recruitment talk started already. And he said, "Oh, as naval officers, we can read the weather. But I can tell you today it's not going to rain. So too bad you have to do your SOC." So little things like that. And I was so fired up. I was like, okay, great. I'm going to sign on in the Navy, get to travel the world. And long story short, they offered me a scholarship, right? And then they said, if one of the interview questions during the process was, if we don't offer you a scholarship, will you still sign on in the Navy? Wow. So
That's a trick question.
Trick question, right? Don't know what is the right answer. I tell them, yes, I will still sign on in the Navy. And I think maybe they think I sell or whatever, right? They didn't offer me the scholarship,
They didn't? Okay.
They didn't, yeah. Somebody who don't need the scholarship to sign on, they still don't offer me. I thought they would say, wow, this guy, literally 上了贼船, like, they just bring you in, right? But they didn't. And I think it was a blessing in disguise because then, when we're 18, 19, you think, okay, sail for a few months at a time, it's nothing, right? I mean, now both of us are fathers, we have children. I can't imagine, life spending so much time. And I think a big part of what you do in your trading and what I do in property is to have more free time, right? Have more freedom. So thank God that didn't happen. And then, so I continued as an NSF actually all the way till I was going to ORD. Yeah, then I was doing quite well then, and my bosses, my commanders were saying, hey, why don't you sign on? All right, and I thought that was quite providential because then they offered me a scholarship, no need to sign on without scholarship. And it allowed me to see myself through school, allowed me to provide for my family, even simple things like taking over the electricity bills, right? Or take away a lot of stress, right, from the household. So yeah, I was quite glad to do that. And I went to NUS Business School actually. So there, and I did quite well at school, right? Had lots of fun. We on our final year, we even went to a case competition, competing against the top 20 business schools around the world. We flew all the way to Seattle to represent the school, and we had like 48 hours to do a case, right? So they just give you a case, and 48 hours later, you must do a pitch to whoever it is. So for us, it was really fun because as we prepped for the case competition, right, there were a lot of boring cases, like this manufacturing company, profits are in decline. Then you have analyzed everything from the strategy to the marketing to everything, right, the financials, and propose how to turn around the company. So we did manufacturing, we did all kinds of other boring cases. Then the actual case was very exciting because it was on Starbucks. Yeah, because Seattle is the home of Starbucks. Yeah, but it was then, without going into details, that was a very fun case. But I guess that kind of was like a nice way to wrap up the whole uni phase because like proof that we did well and we won the competition actually. So, and then I was quite interested to go into consulting, to do either HR consulting or strategy consulting. But as life will have it, I have a bond to fulfill, right? Yeah. So I went back to the military, and I remember the first week I went back, I was in a training shed. It was Cat 1. I was bitten by mosquitoes everywhere. My whole uniform was wet. And I was thinking, wow, I studied 4 years to get here. All our friends who have gone through national service can relate to it. But then, jokes aside, it was a really formative time, to really think about what, my leadership style is, not just conforming to what our instructors used to do. And at the same time, we're trusted with a lot of responsibility from a young age, right? And then you just have to sink or swim. And we rotated around, do policy work, do some ground tours. And yeah, I would say it has been a very formative time. I wouldn't be the way I think, the way I, am today. A large part was because of those good foundation years that I had.
So when after the bond, you had to go back and serve the army. So they go back to the training shed. So what aspects in the army were you doing back then? Yeah, was it more of like chiong outside in the jungle, or it's more of like planning using your brain in the office?
The first tour that I went back, it was to train officer cadets.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's where you have exercises in the field. You go overseas for exercises and all that. And then after that, we were rotated around to do policy. I rotated to the HQ in the training center. I rotated back to the unit to do my OC tour, where I was in combat engineers. So I was in the armor engineer unit. So that was actually very exciting also, because we went to Germany. We went to take the delivery of the new bridges that you see on the tanks during National Day. Yeah, so this sounds exciting, but then there's also the grind of it, right? But I think and then I went back to MINDEF to look at training policies. And then I went back to the ground to be an S3, to be an ops officer in the unit. So very, very grateful for the experiences. I think both good and bad. I mean, in any career, there will be good and bad experiences. But I think all this shapes character, right? And to me, my own philosophy in life is, how do we do our best, right? In anything that's given to us? How do we add value to the people around us? Yeah, and I guess then being very young, right, early 20s, just graduated, I was still trying to find my feet, right, in terms of what I was good at, what I really want to do. And I mean, those in the civil service will relate to this, that you will, I mean, like, when you first start, you're very enthusiastic, right? And then you chiong. Then after that, your boss will tell you, hey, Daniel, this year is an important year for you. This is a very interesting phrase. When I first heard it, I was like, oh, that's great, right? And then some stretch assignments, and stuff, right? You need to do well because we are putting you up for promotion and stuff. So, okay, let me do right? And it involves a lot of OT, and beyond just your primary work. And then the next year, right, the boss said again, hey, this year also important year for you. And the analogy I got was a bit like, you're running 2.4, right? You run your fifth lap, and then you say, hey, finishing already, quickly, chiong lah, right? And then the sixth lap come, you think you're going to pass the finishing line and maybe, finish everything. But no, then say, hey, got one more lap. This year also important. And then the next year also important. Which year is not important, right? So I started to, feel a little bit tired out, burnt out, because, it was pretty non-stop, right? Late nights, weekends, and it's not just for 1-2 days. It went on for weeks and months across the different areas. And I know a lot of our listeners, especially those working in Singapore, can relate to this, because as a culture, we just work so hard, right? Everything is urgent, everything is important. But I started to really then ask myself, what do I really want in life, right? Is climbing the corporate ladder, achieving a certain rank or seniority or certain pay, will that mean that I have made it in life? Yeah. And people always say you only live once, right? Or YOLO. And some of the youth take it to mean like, do silly things, go and jump off a plane or, bungee jumping or whatever, give care to the wind. But to me, I feel that if you only live once, you only got one shot at it, you better get it right? You don't want to wake up one day in your 70s and think, oh my gosh, I've made all the wrong decisions. I've made decisions to please other people throughout my whole career at the expense of things that I really want. And for me, I think it became quite clear, especially when my daughter was born more than 10 years ago now, or about 10 years ago, yeah. And I mean, as fathers, something clicks, right? Something changes within us. It's no longer just impressing your bosses or your colleagues around you. But there's this little life to be responsible for. And I think I was very grateful to meet mentors along the way who then, coach me, ask me, what do you really want in life? What kind of husband do you want to be? What kind of father do you want to be? Yeah. What kind of relationship do you want to have with your children as they grow up? Yeah. And I think these, I was actually very conflicted, very moody for many months, I think. My wife, when I come home from work, my wife would ask me, how are you? And then I would say, like that, lor. What do you mean, how am I? And then few weeks will pass and then she asked me again, hey, how are you? Are you all right? And I would tell her, what do you mean? I already told you I'm like that. I'm okay lah. I'm like that, right? But that was actually a wake-up call that I'm not okay lah, right? Because every day, a bit like our handphones, we go to work, right? Then come back, battery flat, we sleep, we recharge. And then the next day, go to work, battery flat again. The cycle just repeats. And I then look to perhaps people who were my seniors in the career, seeing where they are at, supposedly, successful and getting promoted and in good positions in the organization, and looking at how they live their life. Don't even have time to eat lunch sometimes. And I mean, no doubt I have a lot of respect for them and the work that they do. But then if, coming back to YOLO, right, if I only have one life to live, is this, I guess my life's purpose? Is this what I see myself doing? If I'm on my deathbed, it sounds a bit morbid, but I do ask myself these questions. Would I say that I've made the right decisions? Because I'm one that I firmly believe that if you have a dream or a desire to create a different life, then you should grab the opportunity with both hands and change your course to do something about it, rather than just sitting in a comfort zone. And the challenging thing is actually a lot of us in Singapore are very comfortable, right? We might complain about job, about OT and everything, but we have food to eat, we have a roof over our heads. So the comfort level is quite high. But that can also be a challenge, because then too many people are just stuck in their comfort zones, and then you end up living life, by default, not by design. Every day you just wake up, go to work, come back, weekends go shopping, or take your kids out, and then Monday the cycle repeats. Every year maybe, take your kids out for a week or two of vacations, and then spend all your bonus money or your savings, and then the cycle repeats. So I think growing up with where money was often a source of tension in the house, it made me feel like, hey, it has to be a better way, right? You cannot just keep, every day. I mean, I don't share this story often, but it's when I told you my dad was driving a cab, right? So and he used to drive the day shift, and then I can't remember what the rental was. Maybe it was $70 a day or something. And the first thing when I meet my dad is I ask him, Dad, how much money do you make today? Yeah, and then as a little, 9, 10-year-old, I didn't know better lah, and but I could imagine now as fathers what a stressful question to answer. First thing, right? And then every day, by the time I park my taxi, my son will ask me how much money I make today. And it was really climbing uphill, because from the get-go, when you start driving in the morning, you are working against the first $100 you earn basically is nothing, because you pay the rental, you pay the petrol, and then whatever else is profit. I remember some days you would say, today wasn't a good day, or maybe about $20. Yeah, and I just was. And I didn't know better. I was like, okay. Then I said, can I have $2? I'm going to go to the mama shop and I'll buy, some snacks lah, right? But I think these had a very profound experience in terms of my own relationship with family. Yes, I certainly value hard work, and I appreciate my parents for whatever they've provided for me. I mean, it certainly by no means is a bad childhood, right? I'm very, very grateful. I wouldn't be who I am if not for them. And I think a lot of things can't be measured in just wealth alone. There are families with a lot more, but perhaps have less happy childhoods, right? So, just to add some perspective, but it also gave me I guess perhaps even subconsciously, a desire to say, how could we make money work harder for ourselves, rather than us having to exchange time for money. And in some cases, my dad was sick, fever, flu, whatever, and because the rental is still running, right? You just have to drive. Maybe he would just drive and then rest, take a nap, and then at least cover your costs for the day. Yeah, and so not just exchanging time, but health for money. And I mean, not everybody might drive a cab now, those of our listeners, but aren't we doing the same, right? Those of us in our work, hankering after the next promotion to, get another few $100s more. it gave me a huge, shift in my perspective in the way we think about money, the way we think about how we can provide for our families. A lot of people are fearful about investing. But I guess at the back of my mind was there a better way other than just the tested and proven path, which I already knew. Looking at the people around me, it seemed like there's more of the same, right? And then there's a quote that says insanity is doing the same thing, but expecting a different result, right? So that started my quest, I guess, to start searching and then that hunger to find out how do I make my money work harder.
So then how did you kind of like end up with property investing? Since there's so many medium, right? I think you've tried stocks, options, trading, but end up you're in UK property investing specifically. So how did that so-called opportunity or niche came about for you?
Yeah. That's a good question. Trading, I wasn't very successful. I didn't meet you then. But interestingly, in school, I had some friends who were really brilliant, on track to get first class honours. And then there was more of an opportunity with Hang Seng and the STI opening an hour apart. And, when warrants and all that were first traded, there was a huge opportunity to, right price the warrants and make a huge amount of money every day. Yeah. So I go and learn from them. I go and calculate. And then, they will make like a few $1,000s in just one or 2 hours in the morning when the market's open, and then they close their positions and they're done. Yeah. So I have a friend, I won't say who, has done really well for himself. Really, really good guy, good heart. And he's made his fortune through that. But for me, I guess when I was following them, I did my calculations. And in humility, I'm not very stupid right? I think I'm quite a smart guy. But when I did all my calculations and the markets open, I see, different. What I calculated versus that. Somebody, with a real trader instinct would see the arbitrage opportunity and whack, right? And grab it. For me, my first instinct is I doubted my calculations. Yeah. I doubted my research. So I think, and beyond that, I attended a lot of courses. I did stocks, I did options, I did tax liens. I went for these big seminars where they organize lots of speakers coming in to talk. And I attended a lot of these courses. And I always tell myself, cannot just attend courses. You have to take action, right? Because there are some people become course junkie, just attend all the courses but never ever take action. And you and I know that they won't get very far, right? If you don't apply what you learned. So I really apply what I learned, but still not very successful. Some days, I remember I was very excited. As an undergrad, some days I can make 2K in my trading. And other days, maybe I lose 5,000. So my emotions was out of whack. Because at that point, if I lose 5,000, right, that's almost my whole capital, And I realized I was gambling rather than really investing. But I think something is I guess it's a search, right? Everybody has to find something that resonates with you. You find that this is something that maybe suits your temperament. Some people I know are amazing traders. They're super calm. They see the opportunity. Trade finish really, whether they win or they lose, they can go and sleep at night and tomorrow continue. It's like it's a system, right? I know for one, you would always suggest that have a system and rules, right, when you trade. But for me, I guess I was too emotional about it. It felt, without realizing, or maybe I didn't want to admit it, it felt like gambling. The adrenaline rush of when you make a profit and very happy, and then the sinking feeling when you make a loss. Yeah. But I think that aside, I started to, wake up in the morning, first thing I want to do is check on my positions and that kind of anxiety. Never want to say good morning to my family. I want to check my positions first. So I started to realize that it was perhaps controlling me too much than I have liked. And perhaps my temperament is better suited to something that's less exciting. Yeah, less of a short time frame, because maybe it's just the way I'm wired, right? And which is why now I tell people I love property investing, and I love to do it in a way where it's boring. Yeah, because with our due diligence and our research process, I already know how much money I'm going to make every month before I even buy the deal. Yeah, and they're very predictable, very safe. I don't need to make 10x returns like in crypto, but at the same time, it's very safe. It's a very safe and predictable way of growing wealth, which may or may not be for everyone, but I felt like it suited my temperament, right? I don't need to every morning, check and see how it is. Oh, okay, my house is still there. Right? In fact, it's more like every month. There's work involved to get the property set up, but once it's set up and it's rented out, then every month, your letting agents would send you a landlord statement. You just check it. And the first time quite kanchong, you can see bank account money really come in or not. But after a while, after you've built your portfolio of a few properties, then it becomes quite clockwork. You know what to expect. Yeah.
So how did they learn about property investing? Is it like you said, go for courses, and pick up the skills and knowledge from there?
I did, yeah. Actually, I attended an event at the expo where, one of these event organizers brought in Robert Kiyosaki. Yeah, and I read Robert Kiyosaki's books when I was at school. I told you I was very hungry to learn, right? Like, how do I make my money work harder? So I read if there's a personal development or finance section in the library, every day when I go home from school, right, my backpack is filled with books. Everybody look at me like, wow, this guy study very hard. But inside it's none of my course books. It's all these, Rich Dad Poor Dad, all the personal development, personal finance type books. And I would just read and learn. But I think it's helpful, but you can't learn everything just in a book alone, right? I always say otherwise librarians will be the richest people in the world. Nothing against librarians. I have friends who are librarians, but you have to, I guess, cross the gap between just the theory of it, which is interesting to open our minds to what is possible, versus how to actually execute it and make it a reality. So for me, to your question on how did I get started in property, I attended this event where Robert Kiyosaki was there. So I was like, wow, he's coming to Singapore, right? We better go and learn from this guy. And he was on stage and he said, if you want to learn about property investing and passive income, learn from this guy. He pointed to one of the speakers. I was like, okay, that's pretty clear advice, right? And that's what I wanted to do, right? I was curious to learn more. So I went to learn and I invested. I attended like a weekend training. I was amazed. It really opened my eyes to the opportunities of investing in property in the UK. I didn't even know that you can buy a terrace in the UK for less than £100,000, which is not even 200,000 Sing. In Singapore, I can't even buy half a HDB. There you can buy a terrace house. I was like, really, man? In Singapore, it costs you a few million, right, for a terrace. So things like that. And you can get very good yields, at least 6 to 8% net yields, not even gross yields in property there. I was like, wow. It opened my eyes because I studied in NUS, right? As I said, I never studied overseas. Even those who study overseas, or people who live overseas may not even see the opportunity that's there because they were just there to study or live. They were not there to evaluate the opportunities in property. And my wife and I decided to go all in. We said, we're going to learn. We took up a mentorship from the people who were teaching us. We flew to the UK. This is when more than 13 years now, I think. Yeah, we flew to the UK for 3 days, one-on-one with our mentor. We built a team of experts on the ground to teach us more about the property business. And we invested in our first property there. Lots of hard knocks and challenges along the way. But fast forward to today, we have a portfolio of more than 80 plus units across 25 properties, generating passive income every month. And yeah, I think if not for that decision that we made then, I don't think we'll be where we are today. Has it been a bed of roses? Absolutely not. A lot of challenges along the way, hard knocks, painful experiences, losing money in property as well, which I don't know if you're interested, I can share more. Because a lot of people always say, Daniel always share about all the successes, right? What about the difficult times? So yeah, I think that's how we really got into property.
Okay, we'll definitely get into the painful moments later on, but maybe for now, I'd like to hear maybe your thoughts or the emotions going through your head when you decide to leave your full-time job and to do property investing. I guess full-time or basically quitting your job and to do this, spend more time on it. So what was the transition like? What were the thoughts in your head before you embark on this journey?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because I think a lot of people at many points in their career will think, is this the right job
Yeah.
for me? Is this the right career or industry? Should I make a change? Not an easy question, and I think everybody would struggle with that answer. What are the better opportunities that might be out there? And some people think of going to set up a business. I mean, you and I are business owners, and we know fellow business owners who are very successful. But at the same time, for whoever's listening, if you're thinking of, you have no experience in F&B and you just want to set up a cafe and think that you'll make money, I think please don't. Even the successful F&Bs they work super hard, wake up very early in the morning, have a lot of challenges with staff and turnover and all that, and they maybe make 6% net at the end of the year. You might as well, just buy a property or invest in a stock, I don't know. Save yourself the hassle and all the fixed cost. Yeah. But back to your question,
the thought process you had
when I was transiting, right?
Yeah, how were you feeling? Or what made you feel okay? Now is the time. Let's do this.
Yeah, I think it was having clarity on what I wanted and what I didn't want. Yeah, so for many months there was a struggle because we don't always know so clearly what we want or what we don't. Yeah, and if it's not this, then what's next? And then obviously I was married, I had a kid. It's not like we are 18 years old, right? Then you just give care to the wind and just go and try anything, fail. If you succeed, great. But I wanted to smoothen the transition process, right? Such that at least from the practical financial side of things, right, it's not such a big hit to the family, right? Even if I had to take a pay cut and all that. So I think a big consideration was how can I cushion or smoothen that transition process, even if I had to take a pay cut, which I did. How do I smoothen it? And I think because, then I had bought my first couple of properties, or what I now call Golden Goose Properties, the golden goose that lays golden eggs, and then with the eggs you can live off that income every month, right? And the next month, your tenant pays you again, or the golden goose lays another egg. So we had built our passive income, up at that point to a few $1,000s.
So meaning the few properties they have are paying you like a few $1,000s a month recurringly.
Yes.
Okay.
So when I left the military, a lot of my friends were like, "Hey, you siao, right? It's a iron rice bowl, and you're doing well. So why leave lah, right?" And a lot of people couldn't understand it. I think even then, people were saying, "Hey, why don't you go for your masters, right? If they sponsor you masters, will you stay and stuff like that?" But I guess a big question I always ask myself is, what is my strategy? What is my end goal? And will all these things bring me closer to my end goal, right? So, okay, if my end goal is more time freedom, not having to work so hard, not having to OT so much, not needing to chase and compete with each other, friends that I care about. But when it comes to work, it's a bit every man for himself because there's a lot of trying to outdo each other. And I really didn't like that aspect of things. So if it's more time freedom and all that, will MBA help me to get there? Actually, when you ask yourself these questions and be absolutely brutally honest with yourself, the answer is no, right? For me, my answer was no then. Yes, you will feel good being a master's owner, but then doesn't really bring me closer to my end outcome. Yeah. And as I was growing my passive income, and I mean, the analogy I have is active income is here, right? And then passive income when you're starting out is here. As I grow my passive income, that will allow me to reduce my active income. Right? Active income for a lot of people is in their jobs, right? But for others who might be good at trading, they might be good at other, crypto or other sources of active income, finding the next winner, right? And that's great, right? Because I think we've had a good run in the financial markets in the recent times. And people have generated a chunk of active income. My suggestion is always then to think, yes, continue doing what you're good at. And I think a lot of our students are doctors, IT professionals, people in the civil service, very good at their active incomes because they've studied many years, they've spent many years climbing their corporate ladder, and they could even like what they do. But if you only focus on active income without channeling some of that into building passive income sources, then you always continue working, or you always have to work at the active income. Once you stop doing that, then the income drops, right? And then the question is, how can I build something that's recurring, that is passive? not 100% passive, of course, but you need to learn the skill set to do it safely, get it set up well, and over time it becomes more and more passive. And as the passive income grows, I can then take steps down in my active income, which is exactly what I did in the transition, right? I took a pay cut when I left the military because of the short career that we have in the military, right? So then, but actually net, I wasn't really taking a pay cut because I had grown my passive income to a certain level, right? So on the total basis, actually I was quite okay. And as I continued to grow my passive income, that allowed me to also take more steps back on my active income and create more of the life that I wanted, which is having more time with my family, with the kids, which is why I shared with you earlier. I then took on a kind of like a consulting role, but for 3 days a week. You see that? So initially I was working OT nonstop, right? Then I took a pay cut. Then now instead of 5 days, I'm working 3 days a week. And I continue to grow my passive income on the side. So that's how, to me, that's a primary consideration for someone who wants to transit in a way that is safe, that's secure. Your family doesn't really feel a big hit like, wow, suddenly daddy transit, then everybody have to tighten their belts, no more holidays or anything. But at the same time, I also believe a lot in delayed gratification. We were pretty frugal in those years because we had our eyes on the price, on the end goal, which is, all right, every additional... Here's a thing for you, right, Rainer? A big part of my mindset was every year is important and you have to work very hard and get the promotion, right? Otherwise, or the boss might say, hey, quota lah, right? This year is somebody else's turn to promote, not your turn. So...
Just to pause on that one. So I was curious, I wanted to ask, so every year you say that this is an important year. So does it mean you get promoted every year since every year is important if you deliver?
Oh, you wish.
Oh, so it's like kind of got bluff in that sense. It's an important year, but there's no promotion for that year?
Not really, but you have to see consistent behavior over time. Then, you will be put up for promotion. And when you're promoted to the next better rank, this is across a lot of areas in the public service. Then you're competing with a lot of seniors who are in the rank, who are taking on more complex roles. They've served longer in their rank. And then they will be more eligible for promotion to the next rank because you have just promoted,
Yeah.
Yeah, but you cannot say that I just promoted, then I relax, right?
Okay, that explains why every year is important.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think the big shift in perspective came where, let's see, and everybody is hankering after their next promotion because they want to provide a better, for some people it might be aspirations, but I think a lot of it is practical as well, right? You get a pay increase and you can better provide for your family. But then I realized that the one game changer thought came, right? That every Golden Goose property I buy, I'm effectively giving myself a promotion. Because it's going to give, if I buy a buy-to-let, it gives me 500 more a month. If I buy a HMO, which is a house of multiple occupation, where you rent it out by the room, gives you another 1,000 some a month of passive income. It's like, that's crazy, right? If you're relatively frugal in Singapore, I think most people, 4,000-5,000 Singapore dollars can cover most of your basic expenses. Not saying travel and lavish lifestyle, but, eating in a kopitiam or paying your bills, that would suffice, right? And I think that was actually a first milestone, right? And even the students that we're working with, a lot of them can achieve that milestone in a few short years, right? In 6 months or so, getting their first property, in the next 2-3 years, building their portfolio to replace their basic expenses. And I'm very, very happy for them when they have achieved that. I would say that changed my whole perspective. Why am I hankering after the next promotion when actually if I'm mindful of my resources, I'm frugal with my monies, I can save that up, every 50, 100K that my wife and I, who was working then at that point as well, we save up, we can buy another Golden Goose property, we can get another recurring passive income, right? So that was a huge way in which we thought of designing our life. Yeah, instead of going on holidays with our bonuses, right? Which I think a lot of people do, wow, this year got bonus, very good. And depending on how much bonus you get, you travel further or nearer. But then the bonus is all gone, It's a bit painful, right? But we said, okay, let's... that's one thing my mentor taught me. And he said, you should design your life with your properties. So one property, like maybe a smaller flat in Scotland, pays for your utilities, right? Few $100 a month. Another, maybe one of your larger properties that gives you 1,000 a month, pays for your car. Another one, you could be your holiday expense property, let's say $1,000 a month. Hey, that's 12,000 to go on a holiday every year. And next year, guess what? That property still generates income. Still, it's like next year, I got another 12,000. If you want a bigger, more lavish holiday, then delayed gratification, right? Save up the amount of capital you need for the Golden Goose property first, buy another one, and that's 24,000 a year to go on holidays. Does it take time? Yes. It's one thing I always tell people, on those who come and attend our webinars, that this is not a get rich quick. This is not a invest with little or no money, right? But I truly believe that for the average Singaporean working in an average job, who are frugal with their monies and get themselves educated with the right knowledge, a few properties, it doesn't take long. You probably can retire 15 to 20 years earlier compared to your peers. Build your passive income to 5,000-6,000 a month. Happy days, right? Then you can, a lot of our students, some of them say, I'm passionate about giving back or charity or working in the social sector, or I just want to travel, or I take a job that is less well-paying because of the industry, but at least they have choice to do that.
Yeah. So I think a question that I think most people think is that, UK properties has its benefits, but why not Singapore property market? Well, why in the UK in particular? So what would you say to someone like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. And a lot of people think, investing locally is easier, is nearer. It goes back to the question of what is your strategy? Is your strategy to rent out and get passive income every month? Right? If that's your primary goal, and it should be front and center, I would tell people, write it down, put it on a piece of paper. Every property that you're thinking of buying, ask yourself, does it meet this strategy? Does it create more passive income to get you closer to your goal of having more time freedom? Because the way I'm literally looking at it as I buy properties is you're buying back time. Because you work more in your job, the more you get promoted, you're actually losing time because you're working more overtime. The more senior you are, usually they are working the hardest, opening up their laptops at night when they go home after everybody has slept. So to reverse that is then to buy back time. How do I use my assets? My assets in the UK are working harder for me to generate the income, so I don't have to work so hard over time. So coming back to your question on Singapore, or some people even say Australia because it's quite near, or should I look at, I don't know, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, they're up and coming, like why UK lah, right? It's not the nearest place. And a quick answer to that is basically the UK is one of the best places in the world for passive income. And you can start with a quantum of the investment that is relatively small. Like I mentioned, maybe as little as 50,000 Singapore dollars of money's in. You can buy a small flat in Scotland that generates 400 or 500 of profit every month, right? And getting started, growing it from there, I think that's something that every Singaporean who is frugal, right, and can save up that sum of capital, 50 to 100,000 over time and get started. Whereas for properties here, right, actually, if you look at some of the new launches, be it in Lentor, Grand Diamond and all that, I mean, nothing against these developers. It's always near to MRT lah, near to some reputable school or whatever, right? And then when they launch it, it's sold like hotcakes, right? So one of my friends who's a property agent sent me a picture one day and it's like, wow, the whole show flat was full. Then I texted him back and say, hey bro, free ah. Like people buy as if it's free, right? And I think nothing wrong if it's for your own stay. If you want to send your kid to the school that is 5 minutes walk from there. But I think that's where a lot of people get confused. They are buying it, if they're thinking of buying it as an investment, to rent it out and get, be a landlord and enjoy some passive income. Properties in Singapore, in Australia, in Malaysia, in Vietnam, Thailand, a lot of these places simply don't cash flow. Meaning the rent that you get minus your mortgage, minus your outgoing expenses is negative.
Ah, right.
Which if I don't mince my words, basically you're making a loss every single month. Right? So it's the opposite effect of I want to have more passive income, but then here I am making a loss. That's why people say, it's okay lah. Daniel, what's so bad about it if, I rent it out, let's say my mortgage is 6,000 a month, my tenant pays me 4,000 a month, right? What's so bad about it, Daniel? At least after 20 years, I have a fully paid up property and my tenant helped me to pay for it. That means he paid 4K, I just pay 2K. Not so bad, right? And I say, well, it's not so bad. But I think the question is, can it be better lah? Right? Why make a loss every month and, have a fully paid up property when you can make a profit every month? Right? And that actually increases your stress because then, you cannot change job. You cannot take a pay cut, right? In COVID, where people were made redundant or there was furlough, or even now, unemployment is going up in the tech sector. Imagine you lose your job and you still have to, in Hokkien we call it 斗条, right? You still have to pay your, I call it an alligator property, right? Those properties that are negatively cash flowing because you have to feed it every month from your salary, from your savings. If you don't feed it, the alligator is going to get angry, right? It's going to come and eat you up. And that's how a lot of people get into financial disaster, especially when it comes to property investing. They're buying it in the hope that it's going to go up. I always tell people hope is not a good strategy because, just look in the Singapore market. Yes, there have been properties and projects that have gone up in value. There have also been a lot that have remained stagnant, and there have also been those that have come down in value. So you're literally taking a gamble, a bet, or a recommendation of somebody who may not have bought the property themselves. They're basically trying to sell that to you to make a commission, right? So just think a little bit more in terms of, is there a conflict of interest there? Is this really getting you closer to your strategy and your end goal of having more passive income? Yeah. And which is why I think it also shapes the way we design our education consultancy. We don't earn a commission for every property that our student buys. And when I share that with people, they often are a bit of a shock because in the real estate industry, it's very commonplace, for referral fees or introductions and stuff like that, or people co-broking a deal. But we've set it up that way for a few reasons. I think the main thing is that there's no conflict of interest. If the deal is great, it fits your budget, it fits your strategy, I said, go ahead, right? Go ahead and pull the trigger and do it. If it doesn't, then I'll tell the person, hey, this doesn't fit your strategy, maybe you shouldn't do it. I wouldn't be conflicted, trying to chase a commission, but trying to sell them the deal, right? So we don't sell any properties. Oftentimes people think that we are real estate developers or we are here to sell them a property. But I say, no. In fact, we want to teach you how to fish, teach you our system of how to do due diligence so that you can make the decision for yourself. Right? I always tell people they should never outsource their due diligence. And they own the property in their own names. Don't go into joint ventures with total strangers, because I did that right at the start and I lost a lot of money, more than 100,000 Singapore dollars in that process. So I think a lot of painful lessons over time have also shaped the way I think and the system, the way we look at properties, and that's what we teach people now so that they can, shortcut, minimize that, making mistakes, right? Learning from my mistakes so they don't have to make that themselves. And at the same time, accelerate the results, get much quick. It took me more than 10 years to build my portfolio, build my team of experts on the ground. And I guess people working with us get there in a few short years.
Yeah, I'd like to hear your process and overview later part shortly. But for now, I think I'm wanting to hear, like you mentioned that, I think if I'm not wrong, there's two types of property. Your Golden Goose is one that generates a positive cash flow after, rental less the mortgage expenses is still positive cash flow. Then Alligator is the one that is negative cash flow. So you mentioned that countries like Singapore, Australia, or maybe Malaysia, from what I heard earlier, usually have more Alligator properties than Golden Goose. So I'm curious to hear why does the UK have more Golden Goose properties compared to Alligator, which is like more common in our region?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for one, a lot of properties in big city centers, because the prices are more expensive, the mortgage is higher, right? Say if you buy a property in Singapore, there's, an average condo is 1.4, 1.5 mil for a tiny condo, right? And then your mortgage at current interest rates will easily be, I would say, 6 to 8K per month. Then the question is, can I rent out that same 1 or 2 bed condo for 6 to 8K? The likelihood is not, right? Because as you know, developers are shrinking the sizes as well. So part of our research is then being able to look at comparables. How much money can I get if I rent out a similar unit? And oftentimes it's, say you can rent it out for 5,000 or 6,000, then there you have it. You're making a loss of 2,000 to 3,000 every month. I would say in London even, some people say, hey Daniel, you invest in London property. I said, I have a property in London, but I don't invest in London properties because London as a market is also pretty similar to Singapore. Some people think buying a new build in Canary Wharf or, sounds cheap now because it's like maybe 600,000 pounds, right, or 800,000 pounds. It's still cheaper than Singapore, right, or a condo here. And it's Canary Wharf, like prime central, business district. And I think that's one of the big fallacies, right, of or when you think about property investing, most people think location, right? But I think that's the biggest lie that the property industry has told people with regards to investing for passive income. Because properties in city centers, even when you think about the UK and you ask, is every property in the UK, a Golden Goose property? No, definitely not. There are also alligator properties there. And a key sign of that is if you're looking at new built properties, they tend to be way overpriced compared to, say, another property that's just across the street or 100 or 200 meters away. Sometimes even double the price. And it doesn't mean that comparable property is in terrible condition. So then the question is, why should I pay 2 times more for this brand new property when the rent is actually not 2 times more of what I can fetch for the other property there? Right? It comes back down to a very simple financial calculation, right? So I would say it's not that the UK only has Golden Goose properties vis-a-vis these other areas. But I mean, big areas like in Singapore. I mean, in Singapore, if you have a HDB, that's fantastic because more than 90% of Singaporeans own a HDB, right? So if you want to rent it out, if it's in a good location, if it's if you want to sell it, there's the big pool of people who want to buy and rent these properties, right? The rental demand is going to be very high. I mean, as we've seen in the last few years, even a 4-bed HDB can fetch in excess of 3,000 rent, right? Which probably gives you a much better rental yield compared to a condominium. But in Singapore, how many HDBs can we own, right? We can only own one because the policy design is for ownership, not for investment. It'd be great if you can own 10 HDBs here, stay in one, and then rent out 9. Right? A lot of people will be financially free very quickly. But simply, you can't, right? Because it's meant for ownership, not for investment. The numbers are totally different if it's a condo then, right? It's more capital appreciation. Buy, hope the property goes up in value. And actually, I get quite angry when some agents or developers say, "Hey, you better buy now because in the next phase, developer is going to raise the prices and you're going to get capital appreciation." Just because developers raise price doesn't mean that the property has appreciated, right? It just simply means they raise the prices. It's only if there's another buyer willing to buy at those raised prices, then there's capital appreciation. And how long would it take to happen? How many months, how many years of negatively cash flowing and making a loss every month do you have to sustain before you can make any capital appreciation? So cycling back to, say, countries in Malaysia, Vietnam, Thailand, Cambodia, I think the challenge is people look at those properties with Singapore lenses, right? So, I don't know, let's say a condo in Thailand or Cambodia could be 400,000, 500,000, 600,000 Sing. People say, "Wow, cheap lah," right? Like cost of a HDB or BTO, and can buy one condo there, and it might be in a good district in those areas. And I think that's where the big challenge is because a lot of these properties, firstly, the locals there, an average person in Cambodia or Vietnam, right? Their salary is $500 USD per year, not per month. All right. So do you think that these people, the average person there, is going to rent this spanking new condo that a Singaporean investor has bought? Obviously not. They can't afford it. Right. So then who will be the target tenants? It will be expats, right, who are living in these areas. And that's where I think it becomes a more risky strategy because then what happens when, economy goes up and down, right? And we've seen that in COVID as well, where a lot of expats were sent home. Then what happens to this property, right? Straight away, it becomes an alligator property because it's void. Nobody and the locals can't rent it. So I would say a big rule of thumb that I always look at is to buy ordinary properties for ordinary people.
Nice.
Yeah. So, I mean, you just think about it in Singapore, do most Singaporeans live in Raffles Place, and work there? Because if you think location, that's where it's good, right? Like the central business district. But no, most Singaporeans live, in the outskirts. People are willing to commute 30, 40 minutes to work. It's normal. But when we think of investing, even in the UK, then we think, must buy in Manchester city centre or Liverpool city centre or London. But it's not where the locals live as well. So this is a huge point and I guess a big frustration of mine because a lot of amateur investors, Singaporeans, nothing better to do on weekend, go to showroom, right? Look at these And then they get confused with a lot of noise that's out there, whether this project is near to this train station, this developer got this nice stove, they got these facilities. To me, it's all noise. The question people should ask themselves is, does it cash flow? If it doesn't even cash flow, then I won't even look at the property because it doesn't meet my strategy of buying back time, getting more time freedom, right? So, and the way I look at cash flow is not just based on what the developers say, how much rent they're going to get. Even some of them even come up with gimmicks like rental guarantees over the first 3 or 4 years. The real question to ask is, how much rent can I get after those developer guarantee periods are over, right? And oftentimes it's much reduced compared to what the developers are saying. Because the developers sell you a property which double the price of a property next door, right? There's more than enough profit margin to give you some rental guarantee for the first few years. But the reality is, if I'm a tenant in that area, next door I can get much cheaper rent compared to this new condo. And next door maybe it's not that old as well, right? Or it could be in good condition. Why would they be willing to pay the premium, right? You're gonna struggle to let this out. And it's all the more challenging where you have hundreds, thousands of foreign national, overseas, international investors buying units in a condo, or actually not intending to stay there because they are buying for investment, right? Meaning all looking to rent out. What then happens to the supply of those properties in the market? It goes up. It's simple demand and supply. Oversupply, prices will come down. So actually when I share this, people are like, wow, I didn't think of it that way. The agent just told me this one very good, right? Will appreciate how many percent in how many years, and better buy now before the developer raise prices. So I buy long. I thought it was quite good. But the scary thing is, I think when people are looking at properties, if you just use this idea or filter of ordinary properties for ordinary people, sounds like common sense. But I always say common sense is not really common, right? And you will realize that you wouldn't buy properties that are new builds in the UK, for example. You wouldn't buy a property like, say, the sale at Marina if you're looking to buy and rent it out. Because that's not where the average Singaporean wants to buy, right? A family man with a few kids is not going to move into a small studio or one-bed condo. The locals in the UK are not going to stay in the city centre in a tiny flat because for the same amount of money, they can have a house with a garden, maybe just 20, 30 minutes train ride away. So I think these are some considerations. I mean, we have a whole filter and a process to look at which countries work, which countries don't. But I think in Singapore, it's just the nature of the market. Some people ask me, Dan, can we have Golden Goose Properties in Singapore? Because I really like Singapore. I say, I also really like Singapore, but cannot if you have a fully paid. So there's another interesting thing, right? If you have a fully paid up property here, some people say, Daniel, I got Golden Goose in Singapore. I say, oh, really? How come? Tell me about it. They say, oh, I got this condo that I bought many years ago. Now it's fully paid up. And then, I just collect rent every month. I don't need to pay mortgage. So it's a Golden Goose, right? Basically, they're earning, 3,000-4,000 profit every month, which is the rent. Then I say, okay, how much equity is in that property? They say, oh, wow, now must have risen in value, maybe at least 1 mil plus. Then I say, okay, what is the net yield on your property? How hard, which essentially, in layman terms is, how hard is your $1 million working to make you that 3K a month? So they say, wow, I don't know how to do the numbers. So 3K times 12 is how much? 36,000. Basically, it's 3.6% net yield, which is not very much. It's about the same as a fixed deposit, right? And some people say, oh, I'm very risk averse. Maybe I put my money in fixed deposit. I like to pay down my loans quickly so that I have no debt. But the reality is that the $1 million is super lazy. It's sitting there only generating 3.6%, where we can be easily, safely and securely generating 6 to 8% for basic strategies like buy to lets. For more advanced strategies like HMOs, maybe 8 to 12%. Right? And some people say, wow, do I want to go through all the learning? I can make 3%, then why would I want to make 6% or 9%? It's only 3% or 6% more. That's where, they have gotten their math wrong. 6% is not 3% more than 3%. It is 100% more. Right? And I think that's where a lot of people struggle because they just think, 3%, then no need. Why should I buy a property in the UK and blah, blah, blah? Why should I get 9% net yield for a HMO? Even though, yes, the power team on the ground is going to manage it for me, and I don't even need to fly to the UK to do it. Well, the answer is, well, because if you can make 9% when you're making 3+% in Singapore, that's a 200% more that you're making, right? And imagine if your money is working 200% harder for you, how much less hard do you need to work every week, every day, working overtime just to make your... it's down to a choice, right? Do you want to learn how to make your assets work very hard for you, or your monies work hard for you? Or do you want to think that you are safe in your comfort zone and you work hard instead for monies, which then when you think about career transitions, or do we have enough for our kids' university education, or do we have enough for retirement? It comes back to that circular argument. And a lot of people say, wow, does it mean that the UK is risky, or what you're doing is risky? Do I need to take a loan? Is it risky? I mean, I would say yes. Everything also got risk. You cross the road also got risk, right? Then how do you mitigate the risk? By crossing the road, you look left and right, make sure got no cars, then you go. Does it mean it's 100% safe? No, right? But you have mitigated the risk. It's the same when it comes to property investing, right? There are inherent risks, but how do we then develop systems, processes, teams on the ground? Maybe I'm a military guy. I always think boots on the ground is important. How do we develop some of these measures to mitigate the risk so that you have the highest chance of success?
I like what you said earlier, buying homes, ordinary homes for ordinary people, right? So I'm thinking, why don't those citizens in UK buy their home instead of maybe renting from a landlord like you who's based in Singapore? What's their thought process for the citizens of UK?
Great question. Actually, I get that quite often. People say, hey, we're so good. Why the people there don't do it themselves? Right? How come, we're going there? If it's so cheap, why don't they buy a lot? And I think once again, that's about Singaporean lenses. It's cheap to us because our property prices are one of the highest in the world. I think a lot of people don't realize how blessed we are to be in Singapore. Right? Our government provides subsidized housing. Even got grants if you are staying near to parents and what have you, right? And even if you're a fresh grad from the university, or even at university, right, you get 0% interest loans to study. When you're fresh graduated from a university, you can get HDB loans at reduced rates. These are things that not everywhere in the world, people have, right? And I guess we perhaps sometimes take it for granted. So looking in the UK, the culture is just totally different. First of all, people move out of homes much earlier. Here in Singapore, people can be in their 30s and still staying with their parents, right? Which means you got no expenses. But if you move out of home earlier, then can somebody in their 18 and 19 buy a property? Probably not. They start renting, right? If you cannot afford the whole house or apartment, you start to rent a room. So the rent culture is very strong in the UK. Up to 30 to 40% of people in the UK actually rent properties, which is different from Singapore. 90+% of people in Singapore own a HDB. You see that? And in Singapore, if you want to buy a property and rent out, right, it's very unlikely you're going to rent it to a Singaporean. Most times it's, people from Malaysia working here or expats and all. Yes, there are some Singaporeans who rent as well, but it's a very different market altogether. The fundamentals of the market are totally different. There, some of these people in the UK renting, they're just very happy to rent. And the rent is, some of them are prepared to rent for life because it just gives them a lot of mobility. They stay here for a few years, maybe they change jobs, move to a different part of the country, then they rent somewhere else, right? And I think these people graduate, if they go to school and they graduate, the first thing is they are saddled with a huge university debt that they need to pay off, and it's in tens of thousands of dollars. They don't have a credit profile, meaning the banks and lenders there haven't assessed whether this person are they good at using credit. So if you tell the bank, I want to borrow £100,000, the bank will say, why should I lend that to you, right? Because I can't see whether you are good, you have a good credit profile, right? So they can't get lending. Whereas in Singapore, like I said, even if you're a fresh grad, you don't really have a credit profile, but just based on your payslip, the HDB will lend you money, right? So I think there are a lot of things we got going for us here, and we don't realize that it doesn't happen the same everywhere else in the world. Yeah,
I see. Now I'd like to touch maybe a little bit more about your process, right, of buying a UK property. So maybe could you share what's the thing you look out for before you acquire a new property in the UK?
Yeah, that's a good question. Just before I come to there, I wanted to touch a little bit on, let's say if there's a couple right? Somebody in the UK, a couple who's working, saving up and looking to buy a property down the road. In the interim, they're renting, right? And let's say if one of them is unemployed, because some people ask me, hey, then investing in the UK is so risky, right? What if there's a recession, right? Or unemployment goes up, then how? Wouldn't it be very scary? Will you lose money? Actually, counterintuitively, no, because in times of recession, if you're buying ordinary properties for ordinary people, the demand actually shoots up. And why? Because if somebody who was looking to buy a property now cannot buy, right? Because maybe one person lost their job, for example, and they still need a place to stay over their heads, right? What do they have to do? They have to rent, right? And then the rental demand actually goes up for ordinary properties, not for premium, expensive waterfront properties smack in the city center, right? So if you're investing in the right strategies, in the right, what I call Golden Goose investing hotspots, it's actually a very recession-proof strategy. So to your question on what do we look out for before we buy a property or Golden Goose Property in the UK, I'll say a few things. The first thing is, does it cash flow?
It's like number one.
Number one. If it doesn't even cash flow, I don't even look at the property.
So before you even invest, you will just do like a napkin math, right? Mortgage is much, rental probably is much. Whether is it positive or negative? If negative, don't waste time. Let's move on to something else.
Yeah. Actually, I like what you say about napkin math because it's almost like a litmus test. I call it a cash flow litmus test. If it doesn't even pass this litmus test, right, just don't even bother looking at that. So just this, for our listeners here, right, if they don't, we've spoken a lot, right, but if they just take away one thing, this is the thing, right? Any property you're looking to buy, if you're looking for passive income and rent it out and get money, just do a napkin cash flow litmus test. What is the rent? What is the mortgage? And then if you're paying conservancy charges, just some people say, I'm very bad at numbers. I don't know whether I can be successful in property investing. Well, I always tell people if you can add, subtract, multiply and divide, then good enough already, right? Because you take your rent minus your mortgage, sometimes really negative really, right? Because like buy a new condo here, rent 5,000, mortgage on a 1.4, 1.5 mil, 7,000-8,000. Straight away, homestay aside, right? If you're prepared to take a loss and for the convenience of your own homestay, go ahead, right? But if you're looking for investment, you're looking to get money out of it every month, it straight away fail already. I won't even look into other aspects of, analyzing the property further.
Okay. So like all these details, like I think mortgage is quite easy to calculate. The banks will give you the rate from the UK. But what about the rent? How much can you potentially get from your rental of your UK property? How would they, like someone want to find out what's the figure?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So if it's an existing property, then it's very easy because you can just search on the property portals. They will tell you what the rents are for similar units in the development. The challenge comes when it's a new build. Because I haven't built yet, then got no. If you search on the property portal, there isn't any listing there. Nobody is trying
new build, meaning there's no existing property on that land area as of now.
It means it could be like a condo that is still in the process of building.
Okay, but
haven't TOP yet.
You recommend staying away from such properties, right? Because there's always like a markup compared to the neighboring one, which is like a few hundred meters away.
Yeah, I generally would suggest staying away from these properties.
Okay.
Even if there's like, some people say, hey, let's buy together, right? Bulk buy, and then we get a discount off the developer. But if you know how to do your research on comparables, you will realize that is still way overpriced compared to properties in the area.
Because the developers still earn something, right? They won't do for free. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the scary thing is I didn't realize this, right? Many years back then, I also attended some property courses, also in Singapore. And they told us, this one very good. I bought a property in Malaysia, in Penang. And they told us, very good. It's, near the second bridge they're going to build. Look what happened to the bridge in Georgetown, right? It just boomed near the airport. Things that Singaporeans like, tick the boxes, right? And developer, very reputable. And plus, you're going to get a discount if we all buy together, right? We buy, you're going to get a discount. All right, I think back, how silly lah, because this person, in reality, is actually an estate agent. Meaning they're going to get commissions from us buying properties, right? And sometimes they even get free units if enough of us buy properties there, right? So just makes me think that, hey, perhaps they didn't really have my best interest at heart. And then because we were young and we were like, I'm not sure, should I buy it myself? We attended an event, right? They just pull, it's like just go into a room and they just pull strangers like, okay, you come together, you all can buy one unit together. Which sounds silly, and as we talk about it now, like who would do that? But I did it, and I can assure you a lot of Singaporeans do that as well. Because they think, oh, you're very young, right? You can get a loan. You're very old, you got capital, but maybe the younger one got no capital, right? You buddy up, you do. Sounds good at that time. Then we also go and do it, right? Listen to this estate agent who is trying to sell us the property. But fast forward to today, these partners of ours are in their 70s. And one day, my wife and I woke up and said, hey, what happens if they pass on? The whole liability of the loan on the property, firstly, is already an alligator property making losses every month. But the whole loan and liability is going to fall on us. Will their children, if they have children, or their dependents continue to support the mortgage because they have a share in it? Wow. Anyway, as the more we think about it, the more worried we are. So, I always tell my students on our classes, don't look at new builds if you're looking at passive income, and don't go into joint ventures with strangers, because even friends also can fall out of friendship, in bad investments or money, right? What more strangers? So, if you're looking for a few fail-safe tips, right, it's this, right? It's as simple as this. It's pretty scary how a lot of people are still doing that now.
So after let's say your napkin math has passed, okay, positive cash flow, I'm thinking you won't immediately go and buy the property. I'm probably sure a few other layer of checks that you have to go through before, okay, maybe this is the one to invest in. So what are the layer of checks after the basic napkin math?
Yeah. I would say a few considerations. One is it an ordinary property for ordinary people, right? Which means it gives you more exit options. So if you want to rent it, there's a good rental demand, a base of people who want to rent these properties from you. If you want to sell it, there's also a lot of people who want to buy these properties. So the question is to ask is, if you are sitting in a train overseas, whether you're sitting in Manchester or anywhere in the world, just ask yourself, if I throw a stone and I hit any of these locals in this train, right, what type of properties are they staying in? And the converse is true, right? If you take in Singapore context, you take an MRT, take a stone and hit any of the locals, the answer is a HDB, right? And that's the type of properties that I think are the lowest risk, most number of exit options, right? The rental returns are probably going to be higher. This is a very high level napkin test, right? But actually, I would say that you will save a lot of headaches, right? Not doing that. Because when people come and think about investing, like you said, there are a lot of options out there, right? It's not just, buy-to-lets or HMOs in the UK. There are, student accommodation, or there is land banking, or there are hotel rooms or Bali villas. And everybody's, wow, sounds good. I can go and stay there, a few days or a few weeks in a year. Then you take a stone and you throw at a common person. Does this person stay in a Bali villa most of their time? Answer is no. Do they need to stay in a Bali villa? Can they move all their kids there and stay there? Answer is also no, right? So then that's where the exit options get more challenging. Because if I want to sell it, the man on the street doesn't need the property that I'm trying to sell, right? And you're looking to only sell it to investors, for example. Yeah, so I always say you need to have at least two exit options, right? Whether, firstly, can you rent it out? Is there high rental demand? Not just to a particular niche, not just expats or tourists. Some people ask me, how about Airbnb? Is it a good strategy? I see it's a pretty risky strategy, because if, in times where the economy always goes up and down, right? It's not a matter of if, but a matter of when. And in times where economy is down, people tighten their belts, people are spending less money on tourism, and you can have voids in these properties, right? It's just natural, it's seasonal. So coming back to what I said at the start, I like predictable, I like boring. I don't like to be very involved in managing those properties. A lot of people, in what they invest, are very exciting. One go up, go down, a lot of headaches, very exciting. I like my investments to be boring, predictable. And with the income that I get, then I do the exciting things in life, right? I can go and travel, I can bring my kids. We were talking earlier about taking the kids to the zoo during holidays. And I realized actually, in life, my wife and I always remind each other that it's not about hoarding things. A lot of people try to, impress others with their lifestyle, with what they own. But beyond that, actually, to truly be happy, all right, you realize you don't need a lot. Picking my kid up from school, I could take a bus to pick him up, and he sees me, and my 2-year-old, he just lights up. He starts to jump on the spot, and he comes and he gives me a big hug. And I used to think I would never be able to do that in the past when I was working overtime, right? Being able to send him to school or pick him up from school. And I think these little things in life actually are what make life worthwhile. It is the memories that we create as a family. And I love a quote that says, enjoy the simple things or the little things in life, because one day you will look back and realize they were the big things.
Okay, just a quick one. Do you know that you can download the transcript of this episode? This way, you can easily recap the lessons and insights of this episode without having to listen to it again. And that's not all, because you can also download the transcripts of all my past episodes and quickly catch up on what you've missed. So if you're interested, go down to raynateo.com/script. Script is spelled as SCRIPT. So once again, it's raynateo.com/script. Now, back to the show.
I agree. I like the part where you shared, how your kids are so happy to see you after school. It does triggers my own memories when I do send them. I do pick up them from school time to time. Those were, the happiest moment of the entire process. I hate the driving down to the school because it's a distance away. I dread it. But when they come out of the gate, they're smiling, Papa, that's really, making it all worthwhile. Yeah, so that's a good reminder. But anyway, back to property. So let's say, you identify a golden goose, you want to invest in the property. So what's the process like? Because I've never done it before. I'm based in Singapore. Do I have contact someone on the ground in the UK and an agent? Hey, help me do this paperwork. You sign, then submit online and stuff. How does the entire overview of this process work of acquiring the property?
Yeah. So beyond your desktop research, doing your cash flow analysis, you probably want to look at some comparables. So what is the property selling for? What the asking price? Is it worth the asking price versus other properties that have sold in the area? We have a whole process of how to do that, which I don't think we can dive into today. But then also looking into the area. So it's not about buying. Some people say, you don't buy in city centers. Does it mean you buy in, outskirts? Actually, I would say the area analysis is also important. You don't want to buy a property where it's like niao bu sen tan. The birds don't even fly there to lay eggs type, right? So you're not looking to buy a resort in no man's land. But it still has to be a place that is well connected. There's industry in the area. There are companies working there. There's regeneration in the area. Simply because you don't want it to be a place that is, for retirees, right? So it goes back to what is the target tenant? Who is the target audience of, or target tenant of this property that you're buying, and having clarity on that. So if you're buying a small home or flat that you're looking to lease out to families, then are you in close proximity to schools, to parks, things that families would need, amenities? If you're renting out to professional workers who are renting a room in a HMO, for example, then all the more connectivity is important. Where would they be potentially working? Is it in the town center? Is it in a nearby hospital, for example? That's a great strategy, actually, looking for training hospitals, because there is going to be a constant inflow of nurses, doctors, and then once they are done with their attachment, they are posted out to another part of the country, for example. And guess what? There's a new batch of people coming in again, right? And if it's, your target tenant is students, then you want to be in close proximity to the university. Because students are lazy. They don't want to walk very far. They wake up in the morning and then they stumble into campus. So I think these are some considerations. Then the process of what happens if you want to buy a property is, I would say, a very critical part of how do you do it in a way that's safe, that's secure, is having what I call a good power team on the ground. And it's not just like investing in a property, but the way I see it is building a property business. And then who do you need to have a successful business? You need to have a good solicitor, right? You need to have a good broker if you want to get
a solicitor.
It's like a lawyer to help you with the conveyancing, the searches, doing the due diligence on the titles on the property, deeds, right? Because the properties that we're buying, if they're not new builds, means they're existing properties, right? So the searches could be, is the government going to build a highway through the property, right? Is there any soil contamination? Is there any flood risk? Is there any encumbrances on the title? Yeah, so without going too much in detail, these are things that, as property investors, we don't need to be experts in, right? But we need to then work with experts who know what they're doing to then give us advice on whether, are there any red flags or is it good to go?
Okay.
So solicitors, brokers, if you want to get lending, if, people to find properties that suit your strategy, people to refurbish it, right? If you want to do refurbishments on the ground, people to find tenants, people to manage the property, collect rent. You don't want to have a phone call in the middle of the night here. You say, hello, Mr. Landlord, your toilet joke, how? Right? So a big part of building it as a business is how do we also have more peace of mind? How do we build it in a way that's hassle-free? So, I mean, a lot of times people say, wow, then I have to pay somebody on the ground to do that. But it's money that I will gladly pay, because if you're thinking of it as a business owner, then it's simply a business expense, right? And finding Golden Goose properties where the rent can more than cover all these outgoing expenses. So, for example, if you pay somebody to manage the property for you, collect rent, do the maintenance, clean the property if it's a HMO, then you pay them 10 to 15% of rent.
You mentioned HMO a few times. What is HMO?
House of multiple occupation.
So multiple people stay in the house, basically.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, you rent it out by the room.
Okay, by the room. Okay.
Yeah, it's one of the more advanced strategies, but you can get much higher returns, 8 to 12% or more net yields.
Okay, but if you juggle more tenants in the house, more so-called.
Yeah, there's a bit more turnover, more churn. It's a more advanced strategy because you need to have more fire safety. You need to have interlinked smoke alarms.
I see.
Because it's almost like a semi-commercial unit. And there have been cases in the past in the UK where, irresponsible landlords didn't do up the property to a good standard, and there was a fire, and tenants literally, couldn't escape the fire and they died in the property. So the councils are very strict on HMO landlords. Not everybody that thinks that it's profitable and then they just want to set up a HMO. There are very strict regulations, minimum room sizes. It has to be at least 6.52 square meters. Doors have to be fire rated. There has to be interlinked smoke alarms, CO2, carbon monoxide monitors, and the list goes on, right? But I mean, once again, as investors, we don't have to be experts in this, but we need to
people who know
it. Yeah, the analogy I can give is like Henry Ford, right? He was actually put to trial, and they were trying to prove that he's a stupid fella, basically. So they asked him lots of questions, quiz him on like history. Which year was this war? And blah blah blah. Every question he just said, I don't know. Then the judge and the jury said, okay, this proves that you are a very stupid fella. Then Henry Ford said, well, as a business owner, at a touch of a few buttons, I have access to the experts all around the world that can give me the answers immediately. Why do I need to know the answers myself? Right? And I think that's a great analogy, right? That was so inspiring when I heard that. And I thought, yeah, that's how, one should really build a successful property business. I don't have to be an expert in surveying the property or, doing legal searches or doing a lease agreement for my tenants. But I need to surround myself with trusted team of experts on the ground to do that on my behalf.
And over the years, you kind of like know these different people to trial and error. This one's good. Let me take this lawyer, this maintenance guy good.
Oh yeah, that's painful, man. You try an error, as you know, you also get errors, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You get headaches, yeah. So that's why we have built up this power team over the years. And I mean, it's something that for people who are working directly with us, right, they get access to. So it kind of like fast tracks the whole process. You don't need to go and try an error and pull your hair out, managing the whole process.
I see. Okay. So then how often then do you acquire a new property?
We're continuing to grow our portfolio as we go. We just had our 2-year-old, right? And kids are expensive, as you know, in Singapore. Yeah. So, I mean, we send him to childcare. My daughter likes to do singing. My son likes to play drums. And I think that's a great way to design, your lifestyle, right? For every need that's there. I have a property that's for my daughter singing. So this one is like, wow, my daughter's singing property. All the income that comes pays for all her bills. So I don't get a shock every month when I see the bill. One property is for my son's drumming. One pays for my youngest preschool, right? So I think a little bit about mindset, right? Some people think, how can I, some people say I can't afford it, right? When they think of, maybe sending my kid for a class or something like that, or it's very expensive. And then we rationalize it. I also didn't do that when I was younger. I also grew up fine, right? But the question I then think is, how can we afford it, right? Because that opens up possibilities. Is it something that's important, or is it something that is not so important? And I mean, the answer will be different for different things, for different families. But if it's truly important to us, then, and asking how can we afford it, and knowing how to invest in properties that will then generate income to fund this need, I would say we continue to acquire at least 1 to 2 property every year, partially for growing more passive income. But I think a big part of it is also continuing to be a practitioner. in the market. Our students, we are teaching them how to build their portfolios in the UK. A lot of them have gone on to build, 5,000 or 6,000 passive income in 2 to 3 years. And very, very happy for them. Some of them want to do that to pay for their kids' university education, which is a great way to do it, by the way. Instead of saving up one lump sum, say 100,000, kid go to university, then go back to zero, right? And I feel painful. How many years have we taken to do that? If you have a second child, then how? Another 100,000 down the drain. But the better way to do it is to generate that recurring income, which the first child can use for their expenses, pay for their hostel fees, whatever, right, and their lifestyle needs. Then they graduate. Okay, great. Then the asset is still there generating income. The second child can use it, right? And then let's say if you have 2 children and they all graduate, and then perfect, because it's still generating income, which, by the way, the capital, the property also rises in value over time. The rents also appreciate over time, right? And then wonderful, it's a retirement, pot or retirement passive income that they can have. So a lot of people think, and some financial advisors will say you need 3, 4, 5 million based on inflation, then you can have a, comfortable retirement. I would beg to disagree. I think maybe 10 to 15% of that, of capital, is all you need. You just need to have recurring income rather than a huge lump sum. And then every time you spend and you hope that you don't outlive your savings. Right? And I think that's scary because it keeps people trapped in that vicious cycle, right? Even if you can save 2-3 million, which is a lot of money, and then at the end of your life, it all goes down to zero. The next generation have to start all over again, right? And I think that's painful. It's not the best way to steward wealth. To your question on acquiring assets, one thing that I've been passionate about, and my wife and I, is about giving, right? And how can we bless others who are perhaps less fortunate? Even simple things like a meal to eat, having access to good education. So, and I'm quite frustrated where sometimes, charities or they ask for donations, right?
Yeah. I know you.
And then,
have some water.
Yeah, thank you. Then the next month, so let's say if you donate or you tithe the monies, then the next month, they still need to pay for bills again, right? Then they ask again. So nothing wrong with that, right? But I think, can that, I guess, part of my mind then thinks, is there a better way to do it, right? And thank you. And I created what I call a gift that keeps giving. What I mean by that is instead of just tithing, the monies as it comes in, how could I save it up, to, even if it allows me to buy a small flat for $50,000, for example. And then with the recurring income that Golden Goose Property generates, that I tithe. Then the next month if they need to pay the bills again, my tenants in the UK are then paying for it for me to tithe again, right? And, even if I'm gone, I can also, will or put it in a trust to go to these charities. And I actually see it as a way of stewarding wealth. Yeah, and how can we magnify our vision for giving? Because I think a lot of times in Singapore, people work so hard. We always feel that, it's not enough. We're thinking about our own families. But the need in the world is way bigger. We need people to play at a much higher level, right? Not just for themselves, but how can they bring the best gift of themselves to the world? There's so much need out there. So that's something that, in our events, our students are also, a lot of them who resonate with our values, also then see that's exciting. How can we be a part of that?
And let's say someone wants to, get started in UK property investing. What's the average timeline to expect before they successfully, buy their first UK property after taking into account the research, the lawyer and stuff like that you mentioned, all this groundwork?
Yeah. Well, it depends. If somebody is just going online and find any property and try to buy it on their own, which I highly wouldn't recommend, you could do it wrongly very quickly. If you want to do it correctly in the right way, I would say within 6 to 12 months, if you're working with the right people, you can get your first property.
Okay. And where is the biggest part of the work or the biggest amount of energy and time is going to be spent during that 6 to 12 months? So, they know what to expect.
I would say the biggest part will always be getting yourself educated.
Oh, education.
Yeah, because how do you know whether it's the right property? How do I... Before you buy your first property, right? I mean, for me, when I bought my first Golden Goose in the UK, it's very kanchong one. Because it's like, before I click send to wire the monies over, you would think, will my monies even reach the UK solicitors? What will happen to it, right? Is this the right property? What if I bought the wrong one? There are lots and lots of doubt and fear start to set in, right? Yeah. So I guess the education bit helps to remove this doubt and fear. Yes, there's always going to be uncertainty, right? But making sure we've done our calculations correctly. We haven't missed out a lot of outgoing expenses that amateurs miss out. They think it's a very good deal on paper, but in reality, still got a lot of all these other expenses that they haven't accounted for. Some people always say, hey, Daniel, what are the hidden costs? I would say there aren't any hidden costs. It's just that cost that you didn't know about because you weren't educated, right? The costs are always there. So, I mean, these are things that we go through, on our trainings, on our masterclasses, just breaking it down so that everybody knows how to calculate, right? Not just on a napkin, but, they can calculate it, what the net yield is, what their cash flow is, which is why, in Singapore, a lot of people, they queue up at show flats, hope that the property appreciates. They think that they will make money when they sell. They sell the property and cash in the capital appreciation. For us, our philosophy is you make money when you buy. Yeah, before you even buy the property, you have to do your due diligence. Does it stack up? Right, and you have full confidence. So a lot of people say, wow, when I look at a property, let me think about it. Let me sleep on it. Tomorrow then I wake up, then I will decide better. Right, I don't want to make a rash decision. But in reality, is you sleep on it, you wake up tomorrow, equally blur. Because it's not like you suddenly wake up, you have, you know whether it's a good investment or not. But on our master classes, in a few short hours as we teach people how to research, right, there you have absolute clarity. I ask our students, do you need to sleep on it? No. You immediately know whether it's an alligator or it's a golden goose. Right? Does it fit my strategy? Does it not? And I think the education actually gives you a lot of clarity and confidence. Yeah. So I say once you know how to look at properties, do your due diligence, the actual buying process, it's pretty straightforward. Yeah. Going through the legals, going through the lending. Yes, I mean, if you're doing it for the first time, you're a bit unsure. But if it's first principles, are you buying the correct property or not?
So it's like, I would say the first 12 months is the learning curve is the steepest, but once you kind of like get over it, your next, second, third, fourth, fifth property a lot faster because your foundation is already laid there. Everything becomes easy over time.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say maybe the first 6 months is probably a steeper learning curve. But I mean, it's the same with everything, right?
Yeah.
Like you want to be a doctor, you go to medical school for 4 or 5 years. You want to be a lawyer, you go to law school. And you want to be a good property investor, people think, nothing better to do on weekend. I just go to a showroom and you can be a good property investor. They just haven't taken time to learn to do it seriously, right? Like I always ask my students, are you just curious or are you serious? Right? Do you want to do it as a hobby or do you want to do it as a professional? And I think that's a very important line and distinction because I mean, I'm sure you face this with your students as well. A lot of people are curious, but they're not really serious to put in the effort to learn how to do it, how to do their risk management, how to, position size and read the charts, do their research, right? Like they just want to get rich quick. Yeah, but I mean, yes, there's a way to make profits, both in property and in trading, but you need to know the right methods, how to do it, and learn from people who have been there and done that.
Yeah, I like you when you say, are you curious or serious? Because I think a lot of us Singaporeans, we're at a stage where we are comfortable, right? We are not very hungry. So even if we don't do it, it's not life and death. Life still goes on, the job still pays the bill. So there's no hunger to go up to the next level. So a lot of it's just curiosity and not really that serious. At least that's based on what I feel on the ground in Singapore.
Yeah, I agree. And I think some of our best students are those that have a really powerful reason to do it. So one of our students, she was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer, and she has 3 kids to send through university. And she shared, and she was in tears. She said, I'm not ready to leave them. And if I'm gone, what happens to them? Will they be able to take care of themselves? And I tell you, she just grew her portfolio so quickly. In 2 years, she got there. So, I mean, to me, it's I learned this from Daniel Priestley, and he says every morning when you wake up, somebody in the world has the resources, the know-how, the knowledge, whatever you need, somebody has it. It's just whether or not you are hungry enough, as you say, or willing to do whatever it takes to get there. And I think that's another big success factor, if you ask me, this hunger. Or, some people, they think that I just go for a 2-hour seminar, and after that, I will be successful, right? Everything, I will make it in life. And that's a fallacy. I mean, no chance. Anybody who tells you that obviously is a liar, right? It's only the tip of the iceberg, right? There's so much more to that, and I guess it's that willingness to, like, how important is it for you? For me, when I look and I see when my wife and I flew to the UK without even knowing whether we were going to succeed, why did we invest more than 30,000 in our own mentorship? To me, there was no doubt in my mind that we will succeed. It's not like, oh, if it's not so good, then I just complain and externalize the blame. But to me, is other people have made it work before, right? Surely I can make it work. And I mean, yes, there'll be challenges, there'll be obstacles, but my personal belief is to every challenge, there is a solution. It's just needing to be like water, flow around and find the obstacles and find the path of least resistance. But I think the interesting thing is a lot of times, especially in Singapore, is the mindset that holds people back. Yeah, like you say, perhaps it's a comfort zone. But I guess it comes down to a decision point. Some people call it midlife crisis, some people, and they do different things. But I mean, a lot of people are sick and tired in Singapore. I mean, say, very sian. Every time they meet their friends, go for a coffee break, and then they complain about people, complain about politics, and who is getting promoted and who's not. And I remember these conversations just totally sapping my energies. I think what's a more energizing conversation is, what do we want to create? What legacy do we want to leave in this world? And what does it take to get there, right? If it is getting myself educated, learning from people who have been there and done that, that versus continuing to live in a mediocre way. Like I said, I don't know. I'm just really passionate that we only have one life to live, and people take it for granted that everybody thinks we're going to live till 70 or 80 years old, but nobody really knows how much time we really have left. I've just heard of a friend who is, not my personal friend, but somebody whom I have a lot of mutual friends with, 43 years old. He just died of a heart attack, leaving behind a 4-year-old boy. And things like these are always sobering to me because it could happen to anyone. It could happen to me, right? And every day that we are still alive is a gift. And people always ask me, Dan, when should I buy property? Well, the answer is 10 years ago, right? But when is the next best time to buy? The answer is now, because it doesn't matter where the market is. If the market is going up, right, people with a fearful mindset will say, oh, it's going up. I think we missed the boat. Better don't buy first. And if the market is coming down, people with a fearful mindset will say, hey, it's coming down. Better don't buy first. Wait until later, then buy. Then the question is, when will you buy, right? You will always have missed the boats when opportunities in life are presented to you. To me, that if you know how to risk manage, you have a right system of finding properties, you have a good mentor guiding you, you have a good team of experts on the ground, anytime is the right time to buy property because you're buying it for cash flow, right? You're making money when you buy, as I shared, right? You know exactly how much rent, how much passive income you're going to get. You're not in a hurry to sell it even if the property prices fluctuate over time. And we know that in property, it goes up over time, just not in a straight line. So to me, it's a no-brainer. To anyone who wants to do it, create more passive income for themselves, for their families, can do it. It's just whether they are prepared to do what it takes.
So when do you sell? We're talking about buy all along. What was selling? When do you sell?
That's a good question. I personally don't like to sell my Golden Goose properties because it's generating rental income for me. Yeah. I have sold properties before in the past. One was when somebody... So as part of our process, we know how to value what our properties are worth at any given time. Somebody made me a crazy offer that is, way more than what the property is worth. So I said, okay, you like the property so much, I sell you. Then I buy another 2 with the money that I had. You know what I mean? So I guess a part of it is also, I guess for us being remote investors, right? For a lot of our students who are from Singapore and Malaysia, actually it's good that we are quite unemotional about the property there. Yeah, to me, it's just a cash flowing machine or an income generating asset. And if sell it, then I sell it. And because it's always a cost benefit analysis, right? If somebody pays me so much more with the equity that I have there, plus capital appreciation over time. And if I combine that, maybe I can buy 2. And it generates me even higher passive income. Then I sell it. So, I mean, certainly property is not as liquid as, say, a stock. But I would say give it 3 to 6 months, marketing it, putting it on the market, having viewings, taking offers, you will be able to sell it for fair market value.
What's the capital appreciation like for properties in UK?
Yeah, it's a good question. Some people tell me, I always ask my students, who wants passive income? Well, then a lot of people raise their hands. Who wants capital appreciations? A lot of people raise their hands. I say, who wants both? Then all the Singaporean and Malaysian all raise both hands. So the funny thing, and I guess this is important, I'm glad you asked that question, right? Because capital appreciation and passive income has an inverse relationship. Yeah, meaning if you're buying in places, big city centers where there's good capital growth, like Singapore, like London over time, typically the passive income is low. Why? Because the prices are very high, the mortgage is very high, and then the rent can't even cover the mortgage payments, as we discussed earlier. So in our Golden Goose investing hotspots, they are not overpriced. But at the same time, whilst the capital appreciation is not super high, if there's any downside fluctuation, say in Singapore, London, the big cities around the world, property prices can fluctuate, 10 to 15 to 20%, even in a big market downturn. But in our Golden Goose investing hotspots, it's actually fluctuating in a narrow band. It's going up. If, say, London has gone up, say, 15%, our properties might have gone up 5 to 10%. And similarly, if, properties in London drop, say, 20%, ours might have dropped 5 to 10%. So, and that's exactly where I want it to be, because remember, I like it predictable. I like it boring. Yes, there's some capital appreciation over time, but I always say minimally 2 to 5%, just based on inflation, right? But in the last few years, in the midst of COVID, in the midst of Brexit, everybody's like, property prices in the UK are going to crash. One of my friends, very cute, he comes to me, hey Daniel, you invest in UK, right? And he talked to me in this tone and he gave me a very worried face. I could read his mind and he's probably thinking, Daniel xiao liao, right? He invests in UK, got COVID and Brexit. But little did he know that, because when you read the news, there's lots of fear-mongering going on, right? And these journalists, oftentimes I ask myself, are they Golden Goose investors? Probably not, right? They are just writing an article for the paper as a job, right? But yet a lot of people base their investment decisions based on what they read, which is quite scary. Little do they know that actually in the midst of Brexit, COVID, the market went up 10 to 11% year on year. Yeah. So that was great because in every crisis, there's opportunity, right? But at the same time, the scary thing is people are still predicting that the market in the UK is going to rise 10, 15%. Some people say in the next 5 years, the market is going to double. And they put those projections into their buying decisions now and calculate their return on investment based on projected returns on capital appreciation. I think that is scary. Right? I personally think that the market, the way it grew in Brexit and COVID because of the huge undersupply, people couldn't go out. There was a huge demand. I think we saw it in Singapore as well. Rents went through the roof. But we see in Singapore, the rents are also softening. Right? The supply is coming back to normalcy. My personal view is that it's going to plateau. Right? It's not going. People are hoping for a crash. I personally don't think it's going to happen. People are thinking it's going to boom and double in the next 5 years. I also don't think it's going to happen. Right? There's a lot of sensationalizing out there. But things always regress to the mean. It's always not as great as what you think is going to boom. It's not going to be as jialat as the worst case scenario. But in the meantime, we're still buying properties, acquiring assets, and we know how much it's going to cash flow. It's still making us, 6 to 12% net yield. All the other things are just noise. Yeah.
What about the recent rise in interest rates? How has that, affected your, property investments so far?
So the recent rise in interest rates with the Bank of England raising base rates alongside with the Fed, from all-time low interest rates all the way up to, say, 5.25 base rates, the net impact on mortgage rates is maybe about 1.5%. So it's not a one-for-one stepped increase. Yeah. So business as usual, or as they would say in the UK, keep calm and carry on. So the way I look at it is you simply need to buy Golden Goose properties that, because we stress test our deals, we do sensitivity analysis, even on interest rates that are higher, how much cash flow am I going to get? Right? This is what I mean by making money when we buy, right? There's no guesswork involved, right? We have done our math. We know even if interest rates rise another 2-3%, we still make profit on the deal, which is why it gives me great confidence. I'll just make the decision very easily, very quickly.
Because it's like sort of a margin of safety, is it? That there's a buffer down there where even interest rate rise a few percent, the most you get is just lesser profit, but it's still profitable overall.
Yeah, that's correct. And in the UK, they have a different system of lending as well, where you can borrow properties that are just interest only, on an interest only basis. Whereas in Singapore, it's on a capital and repayment basis. So if you're borrowing, say, a 1 mil loan, any 1% rise of an interest rate in Singapore, very strong, right? It's going to be, your mortgage payments are going to rise by 500 to 1,000. Whereas in the UK, firstly, your property values are lower, right? If you're buying a Golden Goose property for 150,000 pounds, your lending is very small, probably cheaper than a COE in Singapore, right? And also on an interest-only basis, the fluctuations are very, very, very small. So, I mean, we've stress tested this on our masterclass. We will show our students, even if interest rates went up to 10%, still positively cash flowing. Are we worried about interest rates? Everybody say, oh, no, not worried. All right. So it's once again going back to how do we mitigate the risk? And I mean, interestingly, you mentioned about interest rates going up because with inflation rates that are coming down globally, interest rates are actually likely going to come down in 2024, 2025. So I think there's great opportunities, regardless of where the interest rates are at. You know, it's not about timing the market. It's about, I mean, in property, I think it's really about time in the market, right? Buying the property that cash flows, sitting on it, enjoying the capital appreciation. And I think another big reason why a lot of our students buy property in the UK is to leave it as a legacy, right, for the next generation. Income producing asset which grows in value over time.
Could you expand? I think earlier you mentioned that in UK the loan is a bit different. It's interest only, whereas Singapore is, I think, principal and interest. I didn't get that part, how that is different.
Yeah, it gets a bit technical, but quick answer to that question is, in the UK, you only pay the interest portion of the loan. So the capital portion doesn't actually come down. So even if you take a 10-year interest-only loan, at the end of 10 years, you still owe the bank the full capital.
Oh, then when do you pay back?
Yeah, that's the next question, right? Then how and when do you pay back the full capital? Well, I mean, that's where, I mean, on the masterclass, we have a whole section on leverage and all that. But quick answer to the question is, I'm not in a hurry to pay back the capital. Because if you have, let's say if you have $1 million in the bank and you're saving it, right? 20 years down the road, is that 1 million worth more or less?
Less.
It's worth less, right? Time value of money. Because chicken rice last time $2, now already $4. You haven't even jiaro yet, right? So then the converse is also true, right? If you borrow $1 million today, 20 years later, you still owe the bank $1 million, which is also worth less in tomorrow's terms. So why are we in a hurry to pay off our loans and our lending? Right? But a lot of it is also money beliefs. You know, we hear from friends, family, parents tell us, oh, you know, lending is bad. You should pay it off as quickly as you can. But I mean, for us, we're not in a hurry to pay it off because you're actually making inflation your friend. People who are fearful and they keep their money in Milo tins or fixed deposit, the only thing that is guaranteed or safe about that is you're guaranteed to lose money every year because your returns on a fixed deposit is 3+%. Inflation is 5-6%. Right? That's the only thing that's guaranteed. Your money is shrinking every year. But if you are buying assets that are generating cash flow, that is growing in value over time, you're making more than inflation, and you're borrowing the bank's money to do it, over time, actually, what you owe the bank is also shrinking. You're making inflation your friend. At the same time, you can make use of that capital to grow your wealth even more. So I guess that's one way or one thing that Robert Kiyosaki talks about, good debt and bad debt, right? Where good debt is debt that you use that actually puts money in your pocket. Whereas bad debt is you take out on a credit card and you go on a holiday and basically money flows out of your pocket rather than the other way around. Yeah. So that's kind of a quick answer to your question. Or as you grow a portfolio of 3 to 5 properties, it's grown in value over time. Could you not sell 1 or 2 of those properties and pay off the loans on the others? So there are a lot of creative ways, you know, for us as professional property investors to deal with that. But it's a great opportunity actually.
So all else being equal, let's say a $1 million loan in Singapore and $1 million loan in the UK, because of this different way of them making you pay the interest, right? Actually in the UK, you actually pay less money in today's present value because your principal is only paid like maybe let's say 20 years down the road, whereas Singapore, you're paying both the principal and interest. So you're kind of like, your monthly mortgage amount is higher and also the capital outflow in today's dollar value is also much higher compared to the UK.
Yeah. So the typical way, I mean, in Singaporeans, I talk to a lot of friends as well, right? And they say, oh, I get my bonus and I'm very frugal with my salary. So every year I pay down as much as I can on the existing loan so that I can save the interest. Because when you look at the interest, I mean, when you do your loans in Singapore, they will show you how much interest you pay over the 15, 20, 25 years, right? And then you see, wow, so much money. So if I can pay down the loan quicker, I save on paying the bank interest, and people think that they save, I don't know, $50, $100, $200,000. But what people don't realize is even in the elevated interest rate environment in Singapore at 3-4%, for a home loan, people think, oh, let's save 3%. It's so high. Last time we were paying only 1+%. So I should quickly pay down my loan so I don't have to pay the 3%. The question then is, by saving this 3%, then you're missing out making, 6 to 8 to 12% of returns that you could make in a Golden Goose property. You see that? Because it's the same amount of money, right? We can't illustrate the numbers here, but literally it's millions of dollars of the opportunity cost of investing in a safe and secure asset that you could make. A lot of people look at how much money can I save, but people don't realize that, hey, the same amount of money, if you get yourself educated, if you invest it well in a way that's safe and secure and predictable, you're going to get a much better return for yourself. So it comes back, but some people, it's down back to mindset and, oh, I don't feel safe borrowing money. And the question is, how can you make it safe?
Okay. So how scalable then is this like investment strategy that you apply, like 50, 100, 500? Does it still kind of like work, or maybe once you reach a certain limit, you find that it's going to take too much time, then it can't go beyond that already?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think two things to that. One is, as your portfolio grows, there's more and more margins for you to outsource some of the work, hire a bookkeeper, hire a PA, which is things that I've done. But I mean, I would say if you are growing your portfolio to 5,000 a month, 4 or 5 properties, just do some simple ins and outs, balancing. You do your own bookkeeping. You don't really need to scale. But of course, you grow your portfolio beyond that, then buy another property that covers, like I say, if you grow it as a business, then it covers some of your admin away. But on that point on scaling and lending, the huge difference in the UK, which is different from Singapore, is the more you buy investment properties in Singapore, the harder and harder it is to buy. And the less and less you can borrow because of TDSR, which is your debt servicing ratio, right? So they look at how much you're earning versus, as a percentage of, your overall debt. Because of ABSD, right? The more you buy a second property, you're slapped with, I don't know, what is it now, 17 to 25%. I always tell people what people pay in ABSD in a typical property in Singapore. I can buy a Golden Goose property, a terrace house in cash. Just the stamp duty alone. Don't even talk about the rest of the property, right? So there's an opportunity that people are missing out here. The second thing is, in the UK, the lending system is totally different. The more you buy, the more you borrow, you are then seen as a lower risk borrower, right? Because at the start, when it's very funny, right? When it comes to lenders, when you need money and you want to buy your first property in the UK, you are a foreign national, right? So they are quite stringent, right? If you're working with the right people, maybe you can borrow 65 to 70% of the purchase price, but they are a bit cautious because first timer, and there's no TDSR, no 15% ABSD in the UK. Okay, you just pay maybe about 2% stamp duty more as a foreign national, which is nothing on a 100k property. Plus, we factor all these things in before we buy the deal to make sure that the numbers stack. But back to the lending side of things, once you've built your portfolio, you've proven yourself that, hey, if I lend you money, you will pay me back the monthly repayments, which are actually coming from the tenants who are paying rent. You're actually then classed as lower risk as your credit score improves in the UK. So the lenders are willing to lend you more, maybe up to 75%, and rates that are even lower. So I actually got a £2 million credit line from one of the lenders in the UK because, we met them up when I was in the UK one time, and we presented to them our track record, what we've done, our experience, and also our plans, right? How we want to grow the portfolio. These are the strategies we're looking at. These are the projected returns, the numbers. This is how we are going to manage the property. These are the experts that we have on our team. And they said, okay, deal. Because if you think about it, lenders are in the business. How they make money is by lending money, right? And they are in the business of assessing risk. Would they rather lend it to a newbie who they don't know whether they can make it or not. Does this person really know what they're doing, or they're just trying their luck? They would much prefer lending it to a seasoned professional who with a proper track record, and they know that you're going to manage their monies well. So I would say that's a key difference right here. And I think a lot of people realize that in Singapore, they used to be able to grow their portfolio. There's no ABSD and all that. But so many rounds of cooling measures later, they find that, I'm a bit stuck. I don't know how to grow out of that, which also answers your earlier question of why not do it here? Yeah. Whereas in the UK, there aren't any restrictions like that. You can grow your portfolio as big as you want.
Okay. So what's then now, I think we talked about this earlier, what's the drawback of this approach of yours, the downside of it?
In what aspect?
Like every strategy, like for trading, every strategy there's a pros and cons. So I'm thinking for this property investment strategy of yours, what's the downside of it? Any pitfalls or just disadvantages of it?
Yeah, I would say, generally property as an asset class is less liquid, right? So if somebody wants to buy and then say in 6 to 12 months time want to sell, I wouldn't recommend going into this because it takes time to do your searches. The effort is at the start, right? Get your property up and running. Then it's actually collecting rent. I always tell my students, they got to get used to this action, right? Which is collecting rent. Quite tiring one because every month also have to collect, right? But jokes aside, if you want to look at it as a very short-term strategy, you need your monies in 6 to 12 months time, then I would say maybe don't, right? Because then by the time you get it up and running, cash flowing, that's the time it's very stable and you're just collecting rent. You don't want to then sell the property to somebody else who enjoys the fruit of your labor, right? Yeah. So I would say liquidity is one. So for those who are looking to do this, it should be investable funds. It shouldn't be funds that they are setting aside for a rainy day. Then suddenly they say, hey, I need to sell my Golden Goose property. So it's about then allocating your portfolio, right? What are the disadvantages? Yeah. I mean, maybe for those of people who are looking for like a 10x, 50x return as they would expect in a crypto, for example, you're not going to get that in this strategy, right? So it depends on the investor profile, right? This is really for a lot of our students are actually in their, I think most of our students are probably in their 50s and 60s, planning for their retirement. Some maybe forward-thinking ones, like you and I planning for retirement, maybe in their 40s. But people who have worked, a number of years, try a few things and realize that, hey, maybe it doesn't work and they are looking for something stable, predictable. They're quite happy with a 6 to 8% or 8 to 12% return, right? And they're not looking to be a millionaire overnight, right? They want to have a safe and predictable way of growing their wealth, storing their wealth. I mean, there's a quote that says, the rich make or keep their money in property, right? So, I would say that the downside to this is if you're starting with very little capital, like 50K or less, and you're hoping to 10x or double your money, probably this is not for you.
Okay. And what if, let's say, a tenant doesn't pay the rental? Then what happens next? How do you chase for payment?
Yeah, so it's basically the key is then to work with a good expert on the ground. So in the UK, we will call these people letting agents.
Letting agents, okay.
Yeah, so they will then manage the property for you. You need to have a good tenancy agreement in place because then there's recourse against the tenant. You can serve them notice. A lot of times the tenants don't pay because not because they suka don't pay lah, right? They might have a challenge. So one of my tenants on the property, he didn't pay, right? Then the letting agent told me this guy didn't pay and they're gonna pay him a visit and see what's the issue. So he said he injured his leg and he couldn't go to work, right? So he couldn't pay. But is it okay that he pays me in installments over the next 3 to 4 months? So then there's a decision as a landlord, right? Do you say yes or do you say no, I want to evict you and find another tenant that can pay me on time? Yeah, and I think this is an opportunity to also differentiate ourselves as landlords. Because not everything is just about squeezing people dry and, evicting tenants or I must make the most money out of this, right? I think it's also an opportunity to be ethical landlords. And of course, we told them, put a payment plan in place. But and this guy paid, right? His rent for the next 3-4 months plus the difference in whatever arrears that he had. And I think this guy has been one of the best tenants I've had because, I mean, it's human nature, right? If somebody is down and out and you extend a helping hand, they're going to take care of your property. They're going to pay you on time. And I think there are enough of landlords in the marketplace that give a bad name to landlords, right? People who don't do up a property, condition is terrible and don't take care of the landlords. So I see it as actually a responsibility. How can we not just buy income producing assets, but create comfortable homes, right? And it doesn't mean that you have to have gold taps in the house, but I would say comfortable. I think like IKEA, comfortable furniture in the house, places that I would be happy to live in myself. That's the kind of standard that we always go for.
So I'm guessing that anything that happens on the ground, you have like a team or someone to handle it, whether they miss a payment, whether maybe the guy gone cranky, destroy some furniture, whatever. There's the team on the ground to help, to go down there, knock on the door and see what's going on and kind of like rectify whatever is the issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And also the tenants pay 1 month of deposit. So if there's any damage to the property, less reasonable wear and tear, as they call it in the UK, then the tenant is liable for it. So they can't just rack up your property, right? But of course, on the flip side, if you rent the property for 4 or 5 years and, the carpets are a bit dirty, the wall got a bit of marks, it's reasonable wear and tear. You cannot, as landlords, expect it to be spanking new in the same way you handed over many years ago. So I think it's just about then how do we have good processes if we run it as a business. One way of doing it is we set aside a percentage of rent every month that goes into a slush fund for these repairs purposes and maintenance. Doesn't mean that we have to use it every month, but the money's there as and when I need to refresh the property.
Are there any case of horrible tenants you've come across that nightmare?
Yeah, I've had one very, very horrible tenant. It's quite funny. Some people say, I want to invest in property, I want to be a Golden Goose investor, but can I always find tenant that always pay me on time and always, take care of my property? I always tell people, it's the nature of the industry. You want to be a teacher, can you always have a class that got no naughty kids? Right? Cannot, right? Sure, we'll have one, right? So it's then how do we manage the strategies? Teachers got no choice because the kids are just there. But as landlords, actually, we got choice. And the way I deal with it is upstream. Right, so we have quite a strict process of vetting the tenant, doing a credit profile check, maybe landlord references, even before they get into the property. So these are things that we have put in place over time, right? Because there was once a tenant refused to leave the property. Yeah, so then we had to serve him notice. In the UK, you appoint a bailiff to go and get the arrears, and if you want to take it even further, you take this guy to court, right? But I wanted to avoid the whole process now, so I told the lending agent, we're going to pay this tenant to leave, right? So just pay him, say a couple of £100. He owe me rent, but I'm paying him to leave. Yeah. So you see, it's about not being penny wise and pound foolish and seeing the bigger picture. Because when he leaves, then I can, refurbish my property. I'm going to get even more income down the road, right? So it's about that, having that bigger picture in mind. So, okay, all the plans, we set it out. And then this guy, come to the day that he's supposed to leave, don't want to leave.
Is there a reason for it?
I don't know. I mean, he just wanted to stay. He said, I haven't found another accommodation, whatever excuses he can come up with. So very picking, we were there waiting. And that was I think November period. This is some years back now. So I told the letting agent, we're going to increase how much money we're going to give him to pay him to leave. Yeah, I think I increased it to £300 or £400. And I said, and you have to bring cash down to that guy on condition that you must leave now, now. And then we're going to change the locks. So I remember it was really close to December time. And come to that day, I was praying very hard. And finally, the guy left. And I was like, wow, so happy because it was going to be Christmas time and I had a very peaceful Christmas. But long story short is, thankfully, and that was just one experience out of hundreds of tenants that I work with. It's a lot of large numbers, right? Sometimes you might meet these people, but you just need to have a process in place. You need to know what to do. And I guess that's why as you build a portfolio of Golden Goose properties, it gets more and more stable, right? Because it's just one tenant out of the whole portfolio. Doesn't really impact my monthly cash flow that much. Whereas if you have one property and then this is that one tenant, it feels like it's the whole world, right? Yeah. So I think that's the approach of, growing their portfolio, working with experts on the ground, and having some processes in place to mitigate this risk. Doesn't mean that the risk is totally eliminated, no. But is it still worth the while to do it to grow passive income and buy back time? Well, absolutely yes.
So now I'd like to really hear about some of your mistakes or painful lessons that you experienced along the way. Because earlier you mentioned, not everything is all, roses and sunshine. There's a lot of painful lessons to make, mistakes. So yeah, maybe you want to share?
Yeah, so this one is one of them about the tenant. I also bought, the first property I ever bought was a property in Penang, where I mentioned briefly earlier, but it's negatively cash flowing every month. And actually, we recently managed to sell it.
Was it the one they say you match up with some 70-year-old guy?
Yes.
Oh, that's the one. Okay.
Yeah. So for years after we bought it thinking that, then the developer and the agent say, wow, it's going to appreciate in value. Once it's built, TOP, we sell it and we're going to, everybody enjoy our profits and go our separate ways. So that was the idea. Like 1 or 2 years, TOP, we sell it. And 1 or 2 years later, right? Thankfully, it TOP. There are some projects that never even built finish one. So thankfully, it did TOP. But the value had depreciated by then because of the huge premium that they were selling it for.
Plus the exchange rate.
So then we tried to rent it out, right? Our mortgage every month is 6,000 plus ringgit a month. Mortgage. Then if you think about it, how much do you think we want to rent it out for? Of course, as close as possible. But the few hundred, a few thousand overseas investors buying there, everybody trying to rent out at the same time, huge oversupply. And when I ask my Malaysian students, locals, where do you all like to live in? Condo or what? They always tell me no. Locals, we like to stay landed. Nobody want to stay condo. Going back to ordinary properties for ordinary people, right? So you're not going to rent it out to the local who's not going to pay you money to stay in your condo. You've got to try to rent it out to expats, for example, right? So, we struggled for many months, even years. Finally, we managed to get a tenant. Guess how much the tenant paid me in rent?
Ringgit, I don't know.
Yeah, in ringgit.
4,000?
Yeah, I wish, right? I should have rent to you, Reina. The tenant paid me 1.6k RM per month.
And your mortgage is 6k plus.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which in Sing dollars, 1.6k is how much?
I don't know, 500 bucks.
Yeah, something like that, right? Maybe rent a room in a HDB is already close to 1,000, right? So there, this guy is enjoying my 3-bedroom, 1,700 square feet, 20th floor, sea view. The living room and all the bedrooms have sea view, Beautiful property. And basically the reality is I'm subsidizing him to stay there every month. Right? So those people, who are listening and have negatively cash flowing properties, the harsh reality is that's what you're doing. You're subsidizing your tenant to enjoy the lifestyle of that property there. So very, very painful lesson. We tried to sell it even at a 40% loss. For years, nobody wanted to buy. Right? And I think, so many hundreds of units, right? Every year, maybe some years 0 units transacted, some years maybe 1 or 2 units transacted. And finally, this year, we managed to sell it at a huge loss. And guess how much I make from the property?
Negative something.
I have to top up $50,000 Sing just to close the transaction because the loan is way more than what I'm selling the property at. Right? But I'm actually really glad because then I don't have to have that liability of together with my partners, right? Nothing against them. They're really nice people, right? But they're also getting on in age, right? And it's quite scary that, we own the property in our own names. We didn't think carefully then, going into a joint venture with strangers. I was very lucky to get very good partners.
Because he also have the same mindset as you. He also want to let the property go.
Yeah, but the simple things, if one want to sell, one don't want to sell, you're stuck, right?
Yeah.
Or one want to rent, one don't want to rent, cannot agree the rental price. But thankfully, they are very cooperative. But for us, we see it as, some people say, hey, education, why should I, pay somebody to learn about property? Education is expensive. I always tell them, try ignorance. It's way more expensive.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's a good one. So, covered quite a bit on property so far. So, not maybe to touch a little bit on the business, right? You have this very interesting tagline, right? Born poor, die rich. How did that come about?
Yeah, actually, it's, when people see this born poor, die rich, they think, and then keyboard warriors online will say, die rich for what? You also cannot take your money to the grave, right? And I think it's really a large invitation to think a bit deeper, to see what does a rich life really mean? Yes, properties, yes, passive income, but what? At the end of our lives, on our deathbeds, nobody will say, hey, show me my Lamborghini or show me my bank account. People don't do that, right? And in fact, research has shown that people on a deathbed, right, when they talk to them, the biggest regrets in life are perhaps not spending enough time with their loved ones, not taking opportunities they had when they could have, and working too hard. That's the top 3 things, which is pretty scary. And I think gives us some perspective, right? People who are terminally ill, people who are very old, these are the top 3 things. But how could we make sense of that and think if I have one life to live, how can I live that life of purpose? Yeah. So actually, it's that invitation to think, what does that rich life really mean for us? And I think going back to earlier when we talked about how it's about opportunity. Are we willing to do whatever it takes to get there? There are some people who are born rich, right? But somehow through the choices, decisions they make over time end up poor. There are people who are born poor, like me, but there's also an opportunity to rewrite your destiny and die rich. Not just, for your own pleasure and leisure, but how could we be the best gift to the people around us, right? The impact that we could make to our families, to the people that work with us, to the people that will benefit from our giving. So I think that's really the larger vision beyond just Golden Goose Properties.
So I think maybe on top of poor a little bit, because earlier you mentioned your dad was a cab driver. So what was growing up like for you? Were like poor family, struggling to meet ends meet, or was it more like average income? Just can't really have the stuff that you want, but enough to get by?
I would say we had enough to get by. We were not poor until we got no food to eat, right? But at the same time, I think the challenge is, I guess, money was always a cause of tension, right? So there's a lot of unhappiness around money, and life revolves around money. And I think I struggle with this idea of money. Even when I was telling you I had a bag full of books, then I have friends, we were going to church together, and then they would say, "Hey Daniel, don't be so money-minded lah. Why you always read about money and business and, investments and property, right? You cannot serve both God and money, or money is the root of all evil." So I was actually very affected by that, because you also then challenged my internal compass, right? Is it true? Or like these people are saying, am I really obsessed about money? And I guess, after I realized that, the quote actually says, the love of money is the root of all evil. It's not that money is the root of all evil. So money in itself is not good or bad. It simply amplifies who we are as people, right? If somebody is evil, then you have more money, you have more resources to do evil. But if you're good, you can steward wealth and grow it well. It also magnifies the impact that you can do. So I think that made me realize that we need to be good stewards of the wealth that is given to us, not just hide it in a Milo tin or hide it under the ground. But how could we magnify, how could we multiply that, doing it in a way that's prudent, rather than just wasting our life away watching Netflix. Not to say I also enjoy watching Netflix, but, not using that as an excuse for our inaction to create a life that is better.
One thing that I also kind of noticed, that people who, find success or do well in life, maybe financially, right? I could be biased here, but it all stems from, in their childhood, they were hungry because they are not from like a rich family. They're like middle or poor. And then that's where they realize that, money really can do a lot of things. I want to make more money so I can have a better quality of life. I can, not be constrained the way I'm constrained right now, like in their teens or whatsoever. Then that kind of like sits into their subconscious, and later in life, the hunger is there, and they go out there and, kind of like push and, do great things in life. So that's some patterns that I'm seeing. Then now that I'm a father myself, like you, right? Then I'm trying to think, how can my children, have that hunger? Because I don't want them to kind of like cruise through life, things are easy, and then just grow up and just, nothing wrong with being, normal and stuff like that. But still, I want them to have that hunger in them, so they don't kind of like take things for granted and, cruise through life. So has that ever thought or occurred to your mind?
Yeah, all the time actually, because, I was quite a nerd in school, right? I was a prefect in school, I did well in school and all that. And it's interesting, right? Because my kids are in primary school. They come back and say, hey, you do your spelling, right? Go do your homework, do your things here. Things that Singaporean parents do, right? But if you think about it and you fast forward, right? Even if they do well in school, they still get good jobs, and you extrapolate another 10, 20 years into their life, they will still be frustrated in the rat race, as we call it, right? Trying to make ends meet and going through the same frustrations. So sometimes there's two sides of me, right? One that has been conditioned from my childhood to do well at school and all this. But there's another side of me that's, I would say, the Golden Goose side, which is a bit more enlightened, right? Where it's not just about grades and it's not just about finding a good job, because majority of people in Singapore actually have done that, but they're still equally frustrated. They still haven't found their financial freedom. And yet I'm still telling my kids, hey, do your things here, do your spelling. You know what I mean? They're still going on the same trajectory, right? So to the same question of like, what needs to change, right? In the way I educate my kids so that they don't just end up one day in their 30s and their 40s, equally frustrated as I was at that age. And I think, I don't really have a model answer to this because we are first-time parents figuring it out for ourselves, right? But I think a big part of that is, I guess, financial principles that they need to learn. My wife and I personally believe that the ethic of hard work is important, right? So, and you learn discipline through school, through your things here. You learn that through, preparing, packing your bag well, making sure you write things down. I mean, a lot of these life lessons are applicable even down the road. I mean, people say that with AI and everything, our kids' jobs that they are going to do haven't even been invented. They don't even exist today. So it's then, I think, what are some traits, personality traits, character traits that we want to develop? And I think a big part of that is resilience, hunger, as you say. And I guess, my kids don't know that they have a portfolio of Golden Goose properties that will, even if they don't work the rest of the day of their life, they will get a benefit of that. In fact, my wife and I designed a trust such that if touch wood, anything happens to us, it was a huge conversation about, and we had to think about it, pray about it, how much is enough so that they don't starve, but how much is too much that it will cripple them. Yeah, so we design it such that you will pay for, the living expenses, but not necessarily enough such that they don't need to work. Yeah, so I think, everybody has that gift that they have their purpose in the world, right? And I guess a big part of what I try to remind myself is, how do I help my child discover his or her gift, right? Rather than just be a bum. I think that I would have failed as a father if they're like that, yeah.
Yeah. And also earlier we talked about Money FM. I see you being featured on that a number of times. So how did that come about?
Oh, on Money FM?
Yes.
I guess it's they were curious around like, why did this, like why you asked me at the start, right? How did this civil servant quit his stable rice bowl and then go all the way to the UK, not anywhere else, and grow a portfolio of properties, passive income? Quite unusual. I guess in my own journey, because it's my life, right? That's all I know. And I do whatever it takes to make it right. I didn't see it as unusual, but I guess it was quite interesting. And I mean, for me, whenever I go on Money FM or podcasts like these, as you can see, I just share, from my experiences, the good, the bad, the ugly, so that people can learn, right? And I hopefully don't make the same mistakes I did, right? And hopefully gain some perspectives around how they think of money, how they think of, should I pay my home loan down? What are the opportunities I have if I have a fully paid up private property in Singapore? How can I get started in a way that's safe, right? If it's just something that triggers their thinking, and I would say fundamentally alters their financial destiny, it will be worth all the time. So I'm always so happy when I see every property that my student buys. And I know that for those of them who are doing it for their kids, to leave a legacy or to take care of the elderly parents. One of my students came to me, he's 76 years old. He said, "Hey Dan, I'm not a young chicken anymore. So I need to do this fast." This is quite funny because some of my students who are in their 50s and 60s says, "I'm 50 years old. Can I still do this? Should I do this now?" And my question to them is, you don't do now, then when? Right? Because we'll say "Kui tiam liao," right? So, and I tell them that one of my students is 76 years old. So he bought his first property. He wants to take care of his wife and his teenage daughter. And then 1 year into it, unfortunately, he had cancer. He came to me and said, "Hey Dan, I got cancer. I'm going through my chemo. My mindset is strong, but I want to accelerate this journey. I want to grow more, buy more Golden Goose properties, have more passive income, so that if anything happens to me, my wife and my child is well taken care of." And getting quite emotional as I remember that conversation. And fast forward 1 year after that, he bought another, I think 2 or 3 more properties, built his passive income to 5,000-6,000 a month. And he said, and to me, that's something that brings me great joy. Now, some people say, "Daniel, why don't you just go and set up a fund? You can raise millions of dollars with your track record and all that." But I think I'm not excited about helping the wealthy get wealthier. I'm very excited about helping people change their financial destinies, because every Golden Goose property they buy is literally going to alter. This student, he told me many years down the road, maybe my great-grandchildren will think, hey, this great-grandfather is quite clever. This is what he did. He bought some Golden Goose properties and now he gets some income. And that's what I think, right? Like, how could we let the next generation be even better, not having to start all over again?
What are some books that has influenced you? I think Rich Dad Poor Dad was one you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. Good question. I think the one that comes to mind is probably The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson.
Okay.
Yeah, and he talks about how everybody only has 24 hours a day, whether you are the prime minister or you're the president or be anybody, right? But the only thing you can't have more in life is 24 hours. And it's about little incremental changes that it's easy to do, but it's also easy not to do. But you could have a huge difference down the road. So people who are investing time to listen to your podcast, learning something, picking up a few things, applying it in their life, immediately after listening to the podcast, they're not more handsome, richer, right? But immediately, and some people don't see the immediate returns. But if they keep doing that, getting educated, subscribing to your channel, pursuing mentors who are where they want to be, taking little actions, over time, that they will end up exponentially more successful, exponentially better. A simple analogy is, say, working out, right, or smoking. If you go to the gym one time and you work out until very tired, doesn't mean tomorrow you are a manhunt, right? But it's that repeated pattern over time and initially you actually don't see any results. But if you pursue that and you keep to the discipline of it, you will reap the results. In the converse way, somebody who's smoking, you don't smoke a cigarette and then die of lung cancer tomorrow, but it's the accumulation of the harm that it does to the body over time, right? So I think that gave me a huge perspective, because to a lot of people, I guess, are in for quick results, quick, I just want to get rich quick, right? If I can get rich quick next month, that would be great. But I think that leads to a lot of poor decisions that they make in life. Yeah. So realizing that, going with a way that's tested and proven and sticking to the process, I think, that's a book I highly recommend.
This reminds me of, you're saying this, making decisions, right? I'm just going to paraphrase this. I'm not sure who I heard it from, but usually the hard decisions that you make today is usually better for you in the long run. And the easy decisions that you make today is going to be bad for you in the long run. So it's kind of like a razor or rule of thumb, when people are forced to make the decisions, usually take the harder decisions now upfront, because usually it's better for you in the long run. So I thought that was very interesting. Yeah. So what about any life lessons or lessons that you have learned, right? But it's rarely spoken about. Like some common lessons people talk about, discipline, perseverance, blah, blah, blah. But what about some lessons that you find it's important to you, but just, hardly spoken about?
Wow.
Or if there's nothing, it could be lessons that you wish you want to impart to your kids. I believe financial literacy was one you shared earlier.
Yeah. I think a lesson that I guess I'm still learning is about being present to the people that we love, letting them know that we love them through our actions and our words, and having clarity on what really would make us content in life. Because, there's so much out there about, chasing the next big thing and the hustle culture and getting richer and all that, right? Which I think that's all good. But I think in the process, we shouldn't lose sight of how do we show up to the people that we truly love, that we truly care about. When I was working overtime a lot, I came back being so drained out and oftentimes very grumpy, to the people that I love. But actually, it's very strange, right? Because we work so hard because of we want to provide for the people that is closest to us. Which comes to mind, maybe I'll just end with this other book that I came across, which I think, is it The Alchemy? No. One of I can't remember the title. I'll get back to you on that.
Is it the one by Paul something?
Yes.
Yeah, The Alchemist, I think. The Alchemist. The boy who went and look for treasure around the whole
that's the book, yes.
Okay, yeah.
And he said, you can do all this, hunt around for treasure, but never lose sight of the drops of oil that you have in the spoon. And I think that was such a great reminder right? Not to be distracted by other things that we see. Yes, you can have that purpose. You can still continue to search for it. But actually, a lot of times, the treasure that we have is just in front of us.
Nice. Curious, what about what's the daily routine like of someone like you who's, a property investor? How does your day-to-day go about?
Yeah, some people think I'm on a beach sipping cocktails and right. In reality, so I have this visioning exercise that I do, right? What's my ideal day like? And, I start the day with prayer. I do some exercise. Might do a coaching call with one of my clients. I have lunch with a friend or with somebody, right? In the afternoon, I might have coffee with somebody. In the evening, I would spend some time with my family, have dinner together. That's kind of my ideal day. And my wife say, "Hey, your ideal day don't need to pick up kids one." I said, "Oh yeah, I think I forgot that."
I think you left out as well in the ideal day.
Yeah. So, this year my son started P1. So my ideal day starts with sending him to school, right? And it's quite nice because then that allows me to start my day earlier. But then thereabouts, thereafter, it's really, I'm quite structured as a person. So Mondays are my meeting days, so I meet with my team. But I do try to have blocks of time in between, there are two parts to it, right? As a business owner, there's always working in the business, which is, the day-to-day running of the business. But I do carve out time to work on the business. I think a part that I used to neglect a lot when I was younger is self-care. So I just chiong lah, right? Then burn the candle on both ends. But I think with some perspective, last year, this year, that's something I'm much more intentional on, to create pockets of time where, just to take care of myself a bit more. If I'm having a night call, I might rest the next morning, or I might rest in the afternoon, just not be on 24 hours. But, as somebody who's quite driven, the temptation is there, right? Just keep going and going. So, being quite intentional to design my day. My wife reminded me actually, so as you can tell, my wife is a very wise woman that keeps me on track. She said, "Hey, your clients, your students, your staff can all book your calendar, but your kids can't."
What about me? I can't?
Yeah, she can lah. I think she can. But my kids don't have access to my calendar. They can't book my time, right? And I thought that was such a good reminder, right? And I said, "Oh yeah, please book their time, my time on their behalf." And my son, recently said, "Hey Dad, we haven't gone on our date yet." So we're trying to bring them on monthly dates, one-on-one, because we have 3 kids, just to spend that one-on-one time with them. That's kind of like a tradition that we have in the family. So, and I don't always do that, but that's the intention that we do. So I just finished a busy season at work, and I think just last weekend, I brought him to the sea aquarium, which he loves, because he likes sea animals. He likes to be a marine biologist. So I guess the reminder is to put the big rocks in. The schedule will always be full, right? But it's like, how do we prioritize the big rocks? And for me, a big part of it is family. People always ask me what I do. I always say that I'm a full-time husband and father, and I do a bit of property as well alongside that. But not to lose sight of that, right? We work so hard to get more time freedom through our property investing, and not to work ourselves into another job, be it in the business or anything like that. Yeah, but to keep focus on the big rocks.
Just to touch a little bit on the business, right? So you've been talking about, your students, the master class. So what exactly is, the education business that you're in? Yeah.
So because I'm spending a lot of time with the family and I want to design my time, we actually don't run seminars that often, right? Some people run workshops every month, every other week. We're not that. We only run our master classes 3 times a year for a few reasons. One is I don't want to be so busy with that, and I don't have time to spend with my kids growing up. The second thing is, we have 2-hour free web classes that we run. I think the next one coming up is sometime in June, in a few months' time. So whoever is keen, they can just go on there, learn about, and I talk nonstop for 2 hours, sharing with them about property, sharing with them case studies, how do you build a property business, looking at numbers, condo in Singapore and how much cash flow versus, property in the UK. So I highly recommend anyone who wants to do that. We just provide free education to just uplift people's decision making, right? And don't make the same mistakes that I've done. Those who are keen, they get to come with us and spend a whole weekend with us on a masterclass. And then those who are more serious get to, they can apply. We don't take in everybody, but we work with them through a year with the outcome of getting their Golden Goose property.
Got it. And is there anything that you wish to talk about today that we didn't cover earlier, or anything that you wish to add?
No, I think we covered a lot today. Thanks so much for facilitating this. It's always helpful to, have a conversation with a friend and have someone skilled in, holding the space to tease out the ideas, the stories, our journey. So very grateful for that. Really keen to hear about your story as well. I hope you invite someone to interview you on your own podcast.
Sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
And before you go, right, where can the audience, find and connect with you?
That's a great question. I think maybe I'm very active on LinkedIn, so they can just search up Daniel Sim on LinkedIn. They can find me, or they can go to our website, goldengooseproperty.com or bondpoordirect.com. I would say these are the places.
I'll put all these links in the resource section or description, right, of this show then. So once again, right, thank you so much, Daniel. Firstly, I want to say thank you, right? I really appreciate it. This is like, talking with you is like a mini masterclass in UK property investing. I think I have more knowledge now on UK property investing than the layman on the street, right? Because of this conversation we had. So thank you for sharing so generously. I'm very grateful, right? And once again, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
No, most welcome. Thanks, Reina.
Hey, what's up, my friend? So just one thing before you go. Do you know you can download the transcript of this episode? This way you can easily recap the lessons and insights of this episode without having to listen to it again. And that's not all, because you can also download the transcripts of all the past episodes and quickly catch up on what you've missed. So if you're interested to do that, then go down to rainerteo.com/script. Script is spelled as SCRIPT. So once again, it's rainerteo.com/script. Go check it out and I'll talk to you soon.